First, I'd like to introduce you to Community Energy England. Actually, I'll stop my screen sharing now. So yeah, first I'd like to introduce you to Community Energy England. We were founded in 2014 by practitioners within the community energy sector to act as the voice of the sector. It's a disparate sector spread around the country. So we brought it together, act as its voice, and we help put people at the heart of the energy system. Since then, we've grown. We have now over 270 members, many community energy organisations, as well as a range of other stakeholders who are kind of active or support the community energy sector. We remain the only organisation dedicated to representing and supporting community energy in England, and we exist now to help active community energy organisations implement new projects, innovate, improve and grow. That's our mission, and that's what we're here for. We do this by pursuing two key objectives. We make politicians, national and local government officials, network operators and regulators aware of community energy, what it is, its benefits, the needs, opportunities and policy obstacles, and we lobby for supportive policy and regulations that will help the sector. Provide opportunities and mechanisms for active community energy practitioners in all parts of England to connect, learn, share their business models and help each other overcome obstacles. Events like this one today are an important way that we do this, that we bring people together, we help connect, share learning, and hopefully through events like this, we help the sector grow. Next, I would like to thank our partner organisations that have been working with us on the event today. The Next Generation programme is funded by Power to Change, which is an independent trust that supports community businesses in England and is run by a consortium of sector stakeholders. The programme aims to help the sector innovate, test and develop new business models, to deliver more holistic and integrated local energy services, and is working with 11 organisations, community energy organisations, to do this. The programme has a strong remit to share their learning, so their resources page is a great place to go if you're getting started with community energy. The link will be there in the chat for that. That's it. Yeah, it's a good place to understand how you get going with community energy and look at their more innovative projects. A range of organisations have been showcased by the Next Generation's Innovation Lab webinar series. So just wanted to flag up that the next event in that series will be on the 18th of November, and it features Bath and West Community Energy, who we'll also be hearing from later today in session 2. Next, I'd like to thank the 5 energy hubs. Sorry, I don't actually think I said thank you to Next Generation, but thank you to the Next Generation programme. Next, I would also like to say thank you to the 5 energy hubs, which support community energy. They support organisations across England to identify, develop and implement energy projects. The programme is supported by the central government and is overseen by local enterprise partnerships, which also operate around the country. They work to increase the number, scale and quality of local energy projects by offering advice and information, taking action to overcome barriers that would otherwise prevent local energy projects from being developed. They also manage the Rural Community Energy Fund, which is an important source of funding for the sector. They do this on behalf of Bays and DEFRA. It's a £10 million pound programme that supports rural communities in England to develop renewable energy projects with community benefit. Many of you will have will have been funded by the Rural Community Energy Fund in some way. So we're also very grateful to the speakers who are giving their time today. 16 of them. They come here to give us the benefit of their expertise and experience. Many of the speakers are involved in either the Next Generation programme, have received RCEF funding, or are representatives of the energy hubs themselves. So thank you to them all. Some of the speakers are professionals working in the sector, but some are hard-working volunteers, and they're all here today out of a desire to help others in the sector, so thank you. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Kate Gilmartin and Mary Anderson, who've helped me significantly with organising the event. Thank you also to all the attendees for coming. It's really important that you're here. It's great to see so many. We've got 100 now. So yeah, it's brilliant to see so many of you. Thank you for giving the time today to come and participate. So I'll just briefly run through the agenda. The event is structured a little differently to the events that we've run in the past, and hopefully some of those you've been to. We know that Zoom fatigue is a factor with online events now. In terms of attention spans, we know it's hard to fit a long webinar around other work commitments. So Our attempt to help with this is that we split the event into 4 sessions, this being obviously session 1. There's at least 30 minutes in between each of the sessions and an hour for lunch. The idea of this is to give you some time. We hope this will kind of suit our attention spans, and it will allow you to kind of go and check on the kids, make sure Paw Patrol or Frozen's still running, and obviously, most importantly, make yourself a nice lunch, and as well as perhaps maybe do a bit of work, something in between, some important things like that. So what we'll do is we'll leave the Zoom running all day. So you can either choose to log out and log back in the times that suit you, or you can just, again, also leave your Zoom account kind of running connected into the event. You'll find the agenda for the day in terms of the timings and who's talking which sessions on our website, or it'll be on the Eventbrite page where you booked originally. So that link also going in the chat, we'll put that back up several times. And one of the things is that to allow a little more time for breaks, there's a little less time for questions. But one of the things we have later this afternoon is 2 kind of lengthy discussion sessions. What will happen in those is that you'll be assigned to a breakout room that will have a facilitator who's got lots of questions as well as their own knowledge and expertise. And those discussion sessions are a chance to reflect on what you've heard in the talks, to sort of share with each other your opinions and views, as well as your own experiences of being part of the community energy sector. So we do hope you'll join us this afternoon for those, and to hear we'll be taking notes from them, and that will all feed back into sort of centrally, and then we'll distribute a kind of a summary or a feedback views kind of thing after the event. Again, you know already that the event is being recorded, but it will be shared afterwards on our YouTube channel. So that's something you can re-watch later, especially if you missed any of the sessions. Lastly, in terms of admin, we'll be running a few quick polls during the event to gather some data and feedback from you. They're very short, only a few seconds to do them. They'll pop up on your screen, so please just sort of click the couple of buttons when they show up. Very simple. So now it's time to introduce the content of the event, which reflects where the community energy sector is now and where we think the sector can go next. Our focus as an organisation is on helping the sector grow. Viable current business models that can be adopted by existing community organisations and new entrants to the sector are really vital for spreading community energy into more communities around the country and building a stronger and stronger core to the sector. It is important that access to the information about these business models and activities is as easy as possible to gain, and that's why we, the Next Generation Programme and the Energy Hubs working with RCEF, all want to share learning and expertise as widely as possible. However, the energy system is changing rapidly, so are the opportunities available to community energy organisations, as well as the challenges they'll face to pursue them and fulfil the potential set out in reports and assessments of where the sector can get to in 5 or 10 years' time and beyond. We're seeing innovation across the sector, larger community energy organisations getting involved in increasingly complex multi-technology and multi-partner projects that extend what community energy is capable of delivering as part of the transition to a zero carbon energy system. Many of these projects you'll be hearing from today. We know that community energy can deliver real change with people as the focus of design, implementation and benefits. So the potential is huge if we can bring this approach and our sector's ethos to projects that transform the way energy demands, generation and supply work within a community. This leads me on to the idea of a whole systems approach, which encompasses all of this innovation in community energy and transformation in the energy system as a whole. So I know a whole systems approach will probably be new to a few of you, or many of you. So I have had a go at a definition of it. This is not easy to pin down and will be argued about, I'm sure, in terms of how I've done it. But the idea with this was to give those of you who are new to this kind of more expansive understanding of how the energy system works, something to work with. So my definition of a whole systems approach is an approach that seeks to actively engage with the fact that energy use and generation are interconnected with each other and with a wide range of other aspects of infrastructure, including electricity and heat, but also transport and buildings, for example, as well as multiple actors such as local authorities, utility companies, and housing developers. In addition, recognizing the centrality of people's behavior and the characteristics and needs of individuals and their communities, along with the context of the distribution and transmission networks and their constraints or needs for flexibility. Overarching all of this is the need for rapid decarbonisation. So I hope that was digestible. It's a very big and complex concept. That was my attempt to summarise it. The reason I've put that in here is because that's the background to all of this, what we're talking about in terms of community energy now and next. That is the next part of it. Ultimately, in the long game, that's where we can get to. So this kind of approach is something that our sector is amazingly capable of engaging with. Every community energy organisation starts small and grows from there. And we hope that the event today will help those of you who want to get started and support new organisations in your communities, and will also inspire you to persevere, innovate, and help community energy reach its potential. So that's all from me. It's time that we start our first session. We're slightly early, which is always a good sign. So I will now hand over to Kate Gilmartin, who is, oh, there we go. This is the first poll. So we can do that while Kate's getting herself ready.
Thanks, Philip. I'll share my screen. Hopefully I can work that out. Oh, hold on a minute. Share. Oh, no, sorry. Right, okay. Can you see that screen? Is that all right?
Yep, perfect. Thanks, Kate.
Great. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Philip. Hi, everyone. I'm Kate Gilmartin, and I'm delivering the Rural Community Energy Fund in the Northwest. And we thought it'd be good to share some of our experience of delivering projects, what's working at the moment, and in particular, looking at private wires. So I'm hoping that it's not going to be too technical, too inaccessible. It's basically to show that there is a route to developing projects. Basically, what is a private wire? It's a cable that runs from your renewable energy generation to a consumer directly, and we call that consumer an off-taker. So any electricity that you're generating will go to that consumer first, and then whatever they don't use will then go via their grid connection off to the grid. And the reason why we need this mechanism is because we've not got any feed-in tariff anymore. So the government subsidy that paid us for each unit of electricity that we generated from renewable energy sources disappeared. And it was a real hammer blow to the industry generally, but especially to community energy as well. So we had to start thinking of ways around this problem. We set up a renewable energy generation plant, and the best price we can get to sell it to the electricity grid is about 5 pence per kilowatt hour. And this just isn't enough to make some projects stack up financially. We're looking at really long paybacks that just mean that there's so many risks in the project that we couldn't get the projects to work. So a route around this is to sell directly to a consumer. And if we run that cable from our generation to somebody who wants to buy the energy, then we can sell it directly to them. And we're much more likely to get a price of about 9 pence per kilowatt hour. So that uplift from 5 pence per kilowatt hour to 9 pence per kilowatt hour really makes a difference and allows us to look at projects and actually get the business case to stack up. So that's why I'm talking about private wires, and it's really looking at undercutting the retail price. So that's the benefit to the consumer, and we'd be getting more for the export price. So that's the benefit to the generator. So that's why we're looking at private wires. It's a much better solution to just sell electricity to the grid. That's what it's there for. But unfortunately, we just don't get the price that we're not recognised for the carbon savings. And we're competing with gas prices and electricity generated from gas. So until we get a fair price for electricity, unfortunately, this is one of the routes we have to go down. So let me just. So at the moment, if you're looking to put solar on a roof, you're naturally going to be selling that electricity to the building occupier. So they're already sat there. And we don't really consider that a private wire. That's just an arrangement. And usually the person who's put the electricity, so the solar panels on the roof, will have a power purchase agreement with the building occupier, and they will buy that electricity. But what about standalone technologies? So we're looking at kind of big ground-mounted solar arrays, or potentially wind turbines or hydro. So they're standalone technologies, and they don't have often a natural consumer next to them. So what we're trying to do, so what we're trying to do is look at who can buy this electricity, who is around us in this standalone generation that can buy that electricity. And what we need to consider is the scheme big enough to warrant the cable costs of running that cable and trenching to somebody who wants to buy that electricity? So key to a project and looking at whether we can sell this electricity is the distance away that that person might be. So generally, rule of thumb, depending on the size of your project, anything over a kilometre away is going to be too expensive. And there's a really handy tool on Google Earth. It's a little ruler. So if you've got a particular site in mind, you can look on Google Earth and see who's around you and then just measure distances to see how far away people are going to be. And you have to look at obstacles. You're thinking that you're going to be running a trench, so you're going to be digging a trench and laying a cable directly to someone who's going to buy this electricity. So what's that trench got to go through? Are the roads? If there's railway, that's a big barrier. Canals. What about housing? Ideally, you want some nice green fields, and it's an easy soft dig. But then you have to think about how many people own that land in between you and the person you want to sell your electricity to. So there's lots of things to consider. And when we're looking for a high energy consumer, ideally we want somebody that's using lots of energy on site. So for example, a manufacturer or potentially a high school, they're a big energy user. Perhaps something like a water pumping station that's using electricity all the time. Leisure centres, they're a big energy load as well, and things like hospitals. And it's often worth thinking about who these people are and have they set themselves net zero targets? Because if they have, they're going to be a lot easier to engage. So how do we go about this process? Well, first of all, if you're looking for a site and you found a potential site and you've got the landowner interested, then that's a good time to look about where you would sell that electricity. So, for example, one of the projects we worked with, we found the site, or the community group had found the site, and we thought, well, it's not going to work unless we can sell the electricity. So what is around us? And we found a heavy industry user, a big manufacturer. So the people that you can approach within that industry is someone like the finance director or an energy manager. And the reasons that they should be listening to you, especially if they've got net zero targets, they're saving CO2 for their business. By having a direct wire to low carbon generation, they've got energy resilience over the long term, because this is going to be a project that will be sat there for at least 25 years, generating low carbon electricity that you want to sell to them. So, considering the energy volatility and the price rises we're currently having, people are really looking at the risk of their energy prices. And if you can offer them a secure power purchase agreement, then really it's a good time to be asking these questions and getting people to listen. If the site is big enough and it's generating enough, there's potential to look at battery storage and increase the balance between what you're generating and what that manufacturer is going to be consuming. And often businesses, they don't have the capital to invest in renewable energy. They use their capital to invest in their business in different ways. So they often won't have, budget to actually generate or put their own plant in, but they're more than happy to buy electricity generated from plant offsite at a discount. And I think the other key thing is the corporate social responsibility. So working with a community benefit society that's asset locked, that is going to generate surplus profit that will go to a community benefit fund. It's a nice way for that commercial interest within a community to actually participate and communicate with their community. But when you're looking at businesses, it's always worth considering what the business is. So who owns it? Is it a multinational? Is it a private family business? Is it a local authority? So who are the decision makers? And consider the layers, the levels of hierarchy that this decision process will have to go up and down, because you could spend a lot of time kind of going up and down that decision pathway. A family business where decisions get made by key people are great to work with. So when we're thinking about this, we've got to think about risk as well. So you don't want to invest lots of time trying to get someone on board if actually they're going to take your information and perhaps just go away with it and do their own thing, or just waste a lot of your time. So I think key to understanding how keen that manufacturer or that industry is if they want to give you their half-hourly data. So the half-hourly data is their energy consumption measured in half-hourly time segments, all the way through the year, 365 days of the year, 24 hours a day. So they can give you this big chunk of data, and often they'll request that you sign a non-disclosure agreement. So if you've got that far with them and they're discussing a non-disclosure agreement, or they're discussing giving you the half-hourly data, then you've got their ear, and that's a really good sign. So it means that you're probably not wasting your time. You can then use that half-hourly data, and I'm more than happy. I've got a spreadsheet that you can use, that you can plonk the half-hourly data in and plonk in whatever generation you want to be doing, and it will match that for you. So it will show you what percentage of your generation will be matched against their consumption. Because really what you want is them to consume a lot of your generation. So there's a risk around, perhaps they have their demand might go down, or there's a risk that you're going to be tied to one consumer over 25 years. So what happens if that business goes bust? You'll have to reconnect somewhere else, and that's additional cost. Also, if you're tying yourself to one consumer with a 25-year agreement or a power purchase agreement, are you going to be getting the best price for your electricity over that time? But it's all about a negotiation and making sure that the deal is struck between both parties that's beneficial and attractive to both parties. But, I think we're in climate emergency, and the key is that we've got to get kit in the ground generating low carbon electricity. And if we can engage manufacturers or industry to do that and to sign up, then that's our motivation. So just a quick example of this is a manufacturer who have an enormous energy consumption. And the yellow bit at the bottom is 1 megawatt of solar, ground-mounted solar. So as you can see, that 1 megawatt solar generation is absolutely swallowed up by this enormous manufacturer. So in that case, all the electricity would be consumed on their site, and there'd be nothing exported to the grid. So you've got real kind of business case security with that particular relationship. Here's another one where this is actually a 2.5 megawatt solar array. And here the grey bit is what would be consumed on site. So only about 40% of that electricity would be consumed by the manufacturer. So the rest of it would have to be exported unless we consider a battery. So these are really important decisions to make in that kind of business case about whether it stacks up or not. So the projects that we've got in the Northwest, we've got 15 projects that we're funding. And at the moment, 8 of those projects are looking at a private wire. So it just shows you how necessary a private wire is when we're looking at business case stacking up. I think there's a cut-off point as well. So the first 2 projects here are enormous. So the 30 megawatt project and a 5 megawatt, both solar, ground-mounted solar. And those projects can stack up by just selling all the electricity to the grid at 5 pence per kilowatt hour. So if they did a private wire, that would be an added bonus and kind of the cherry on the cake for that business case, but they don't need it for the project to be financially viable over the long term. We're finding that anything under 5 megawatts does need that private wire option to make sure that the business case stacks up. So key there becomes the distance for the cable. And as you can see, they're mostly under 2 kilometres. The big project at 30 megawatts, they can afford to have a longer cable run because obviously the capital costs of the project are much higher, and that cable cost will get absorbed into the overall cost of the project. But obviously smaller projects, this is going to be a big chunk of their costs will be on cabling, and making sure that that's going to be the cheapest option is really worth thinking about. So a few of these projects. I'm just going to
interrupt in 1 minute more, if that's
okay. Right, I shall skip on to this. So it's worth just saying that this approach changes things a wee bit, because we've actually had 2 manufacturers come to us saying, we want to reduce our carbon and we want to work with communities. So it's the other way around. Usually we get communities coming to us saying, we want to do a project, whereas this time it's manufacturers coming saying, how do we work with our community? So it just shows you that there's appetite out there for manufacturers and communities to actually mesh together to find these projects. Just looking at costs, really rough costs there, which I'm happy to share this presentation. You know, we're looking at $250,000 sometimes for a one kilometre cable length. So that's kind of indicative costs. Although another example of a much cheaper, this project has now been built out and they got great value. They managed to go a kilometre. Cost of cable was £18,000 and the trenching was £35,000. So a much cheaper option. If you can find a local contractor to work with you, then it might be a good option. So in conclusion, we're looking at private wires because it was a necessity after the feed-in tariff digressed and then disappeared. But it actually now offers a new route for project development. So communities can work with local consumers to create projects and help them decarbonise. So actually looking at your community, who's in your community, who are the big emitters, who are the big energy consumers in your community, have a conversation with them. Have they got net zero targets? People are really ready to engage and communities can offer a solution and delivery. And I really feel that people are beginning to listen and accept this as a good potential opportunity and solution. Obviously, collective action is cheaper and more effective. So working in collaboration with communities, councils and key businesses is absolutely key for decarbonising. That's my email address and my phone number, and the Community Energy Fund, it's £40,000 for feasibility work, up to £100,000 for projects that are deemed to be feasible to help them develop and get on to planning. So we've still got funding available, and please do get in touch if you need any more information. I'll stop sharing. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kate. So yes, I forgot to introduce the start of the talk, which is that they're about private wire projects. So Kate did a good job of explaining that that's what she's going to talk about. So the second talk on the same subject is from Dave Green, who is from one of our members, Sharenergy. So I will pass over to you, Dave. I know that you're here.
Good morning, Philip. Sorry, I don't have any slides, so I'll just chat. I'm a development manager at Sharenergy. We're based in Shrewsbury, Shropshire, Welsh borders. We work with community energy groups right across the UK. If you want to know more about Sharenergy, have a look on our website. But beware, there's only one E. It's one word. Sharenergy is one word, but there's only one E in the middle. So really, we should be Sharenergy or Sharenergy. But anyway, have a look and you'll see lots of interesting information on our website, particularly about how you set up a community benefit society and share offers and all the rest of it. So I've been working with Kate on a number of the RCEF projects in the Northwest, and I'm going to talk about one of them particularly. And the first point I want to make is about who do you contact? And one of the great advantages of community energy groups is that they tend to have all those local contacts. Whereas if you've got somebody like me as a consultant from outside trying to make contact with a large company, it can be very difficult. There's an awful lot of schemes that we've looked at and we've just haven't found the right person to talk to who so the local foundation that are in charge of this project, so the first thing we said was, you know, who do you know? What are your contacts? And they said, oh, well, we used to know so-and-so, but we think she's left. So in the end, I just had to ring them up and say, we've got this project. Who do I need to talk to? And luckily, I was very lucky. I got to the right person, and the right person was interested enough to pass me up the scale. And now we're dealing. It's a large company in its own right, but as with lots of large companies, it's part of a larger group. So I'm now dealing with somebody in Finland who is the group's head of non-materials procurement. So we've gone right to the top of the tree, he gets it, he's interested, we're laughing basically. But we were very lucky that, you know, to find the right person. So if you've got, you know, a community energy group that's got local contacts, that knows somebody within a company, that is a really good place to start, because it can be a very difficult ask. It also helps that the company said, oh yeah, we've got something similar elsewhere. So they are buying electricity from a, you know, a solar farm on another arrangement. I don't think it's actually a community energy scheme, but it's so they have done it before, so that was helpful. And the second thing I want to talk about is, you know, the nuts and bolts of sorting out what your power purchase agreement looks like. So with RCEF funding, we signed up a firm of solicitors. They should be nameless. And my initial reaction was, great, we've got solicitors on board. They're looking into the heads of terms. I'll leave them to get on with it. But I don't know how many people here have been divorced. But if you have, you were probably advised that, you know, that you should try and sort out as much of the detail as possible with your partner before you go to solicitors. And that's exactly my advice in this situation. Don't rely on the solicitor to do that work for you. Have a think about what you want from your heads of terms, from your power purchase agreement, how you think it might work, what you think might be acceptable to the company before you go to solicitors and just say, provide us with a heads of term. What we got back on the first run was quite simply, it didn't fit the project at all. It had been taken from another project whereby basically the array was on the roofs of the factory. So that has a particular requirement to that heads of terms. Most of those clauses relating to being on their site were still in the contract, in the heads of terms document, even though our equipment's not on their site, it's on fields next door. So, you know, so we've had a number of meetings with solicitors trying to go through this, trying to work it out. So the more you can sort out, the more of a brief you can give to your solicitors, the better and the easier that will be. And of course, what this has meant is basically a 3 months delay, because, you know, the solicitors took a while to do the heads of terms. We took a while to read them and come up with alternatives. Then the solicitor involved went on holiday, and then I think there was a COVID issue, and then we had another. So suddenly 3 months has gone, which is a real shame. Hopefully, the company won't have gone cold and decided they don't want us anymore. But that's yeah, we're nearly there. We're nearly there. But I mean, there are a number of things which I haven't got time to go into in detail that you have to consider with a power purchase agreement. I mean, how do you agree a price? Is it a set price, or is it a price dependent on the amount that they use? So in this case, we're looking at them potentially using 80% of the electricity we generate, and on that basis it stacks up. But if they only used 50%, then we could be in trouble. So one of the things we're now suggesting is that we have a sliding scale, so that risk is slightly shared, if you like. So if they do, for one reason or another, only use 50% of what we're offering them, that they pay a slightly higher rate. But if they use 90%, then they get a slightly lower rate. And we hope that they will concentrate on the possibility of the lower rate rather than be concerned about the possibility of paying a slightly higher rate. And then how do you set that start price when you're not quite sure when the project's going to actually come to fruition? You know, we could agree a price now that would seem very reasonable, or certainly seem reasonable a month ago. And we've seen how much the markets can change just, you know, in a short while. So we're actually suggesting that the start price relates to government statistics on average prices for large energy users in the quarter before we start the contract. So, you know, we've got a reference point. It's not an actual figure per kilowatt hour, but we think that should work. We've also then considered what should we put anything in there which stops the company fitting their own PV. And I know Kate was quite reluctant about this. She said it's a climate emergency. We shouldn't be stopping people fitting PV or wind or whatever. But, you know, that is one thing we do have control of in terms of how much electricity they use. So, and I think it is reasonable to put some limit on that. So we're now saying within the first 10 years, the buyer will not fit any generation to their site without the agreement of the supplier, the community energy scheme. Right, I think that's my time. So if we've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them now or later.
Thanks, Dave. Actually, Dave, you were very brief, so there's a couple of minutes for questions if anybody would like one. The easiest way with this number of participants, I can't see everyone, so if you want to raise your digital hand, for which you will need to go down to the bottom of the screen, click on the reactions button and press raise hand. If you want to do that, I can see that you have a question. We've got one. So Robert Lombardelli, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
You're muted, Robert.
Okay, yeah. Under the PPA,
yes.
How do you deal with your generation falling short of any agreed minimum generation required by the end user?
It's our PPA specifically says we do not guarantee any generation at all. You know, the generator, the buyer is still connected to the grid. Yeah, so, you know, in the possibility that something goes wrong, that, you know, somebody lands a helicopter on the site or something, or, you know, we cannot guarantee any level of supply.
Thanks. That's a great quick question, fitted in perfectly. Sorry, Paul, we're going to have to move on. I know you've got your hand up, but if you want to put your question in the chat, hopefully Dave will be able to engage with it there. So yeah, thank you to Dave and Kate for giving us that introduction to private wire projects. Hopefully that's given a lot of you some sort of concrete details to work with and guidance. So now we're going to move on to the second part of this first session, which is looking at what successful rural community energy funded projects and next generation projects can teach other organisations. So it's more sharing of expertise. The first speaker is Damian from Brigton Energy Co-op. So I can see he's getting ready with his slides, so I'll hand over to him now. Thank you.
Ooh. Hi everybody. I've somehow managed to get onto some odd setting with my slides. I will start again. Oh, I'm just going to do it like this actually, because at the top of my screen is a toolbar which, now I've got it now. Anyway, I'm Damian from Brigton Energy Co-op, and yeah, been doing community energy since 2010, for quite a long time now. Has that started? Are my slides moving?
Yeah, that's now working.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just skipping around. Yeah, Brigton Energy Co-op, we have been doing community energy basically since the feed-in tariff started, so lived beyond the life of the feed-in tariff. We've raised 3.6 million in community share offers. I think we're on our 10th community share offer now, and got about 700 members. We're looking to widen that and diversify the membership actually going forward and try and get some younger people as investors and members. So actually lowering our minimum threshold. It was £300, but now we're going to £100 to just sort of diversify the range of members we might have. We have been offering 5% interest. New projects, we're about to launch a share offer, and that will be 3.5%. Basically, you know, the extra 1.5% was enabled by the FIT. We're finding not private wire, but behind the meter projects in the sort of 100 to 250 kilowatt range are financially viable. In fact, we're about to go ahead with a 250 kilowatt array on an academy, and we can charge 9.5p per kilowatt hour. And with increasing energy prices, that's actually quite an attractive price. And one of the things I'm quite proud about is the community fund we're building up, which will amount to over £1 million over the next 20 years. The slides changing. Yeah. And just briefly on size, basically in the last 3 years, we really have benefited from the end of the feed-in tariff in terms of gone from 28 arrays to 79. Got about 3.3 million in assets, paying out interest of about 150,000 a year and saving sites about 165,000 a year. And I worked that out. That's about 3.3 million of savings to the sites where we have PV over the next 20 years. So the question today is effectively what successful applicants of grants can teach to organisations that don't have access to funding. I guess the biggest grant that we've been successful in gaining is an ERDF grant, where we're going to be giving out 1.2 million of grants to 42 SMEs for 40% off the cost of PV arrays, and that's going to launch effectively next week. But briefly, when I thought about this, what could I pass on to others from the experience of applying for lots of grants over the last few years and being successful with a number of them? Effectively, as a tiny community energy business, we can't take financial risk on new products or markets. So it's great to have an endeavour like the Next Generation project we're doing de-risked. And I personally, and I know the rest of us in the team, really enjoy being pathfinders, so kind of going out and discovering on behalf of the sector and learning, and then passing back our learning and collaborating like we are today in terms of what we've learned. And post feed-in tariff, others have been talking about it. You either need legacy project income, which we've got from 3.5 megawatts of PV with the FIT, or grants to pay for projects without a strong business case. There isn't the margin in many projects without a strong business case. So effectively, rather like startup capital or seed capital, grants are really useful for new projects. But there's a however. I feel like signing up to the ERDF project, I've gained a boss in terms of we can be audited whenever without notice. There's a lot of reporting. There's lots of overhead. So it does come with responsibility. And there is also the other side of it is if you're forever chasing grants, perhaps you haven't built a standalone business model. So I think grants need to be alongside having a core business model. Okay, slide changing. Not yet. Well, I do have 3 more. Oh, there you go. Yeah, gaining funding. So I've talked about credibility ladder and credibilisation. I don't think credibilisation is a real word, but I kind of liked it in terms of it's a bit like a career ladder in terms of you do smaller projects and you deliver those and you do the final reports, and the funders think, okay, you can be trusted with the next one. So I feel like we've done that from sort of £2,500 grants from NatureSave, possibly even £1,000, through to now an ERDF project. So doing the smaller ones really helps with the the experience, but also gaining your credibility. Also winning tenders. We've won a number of tenders with private sector organisations, and then when you're doing the next tender, you can point to the previous one, and it's all kind of references. Something else is by doing the smaller grants, effectively you learn your craft. I think is it's almost a profession in its own right, applying for grants, and there are professionals out there who can help with grant applications. And a bit like exam questions, I think you get used to the application process and the sort of answers that are required. And if there's a number of bullet points in the question, well, then I always respond with a number of bullet points in terms of the answer. So making it easy, it's not an examiner, but make it easy for the grant assessor to give you lots of ticks effectively. Next Gen was well designed in terms of paying the money up front in terms for the community energy businesses, because ERDF which is not designed for community energy businesses to run, we could be about 160 to 170,000 in the black, no, sorry, in the red. So they owe us every quarter because we have to spend the money, put out all the grants to the applicants, and then once the MHCLG, the government department, has assessed our application, will they pay us? And that can be, you know, a long lag. I guess it's a sort of philosophy in life in general, but that we've applied to things is keep saying yes to opportunities. You know, maybe 1 and 3 will work out, or grants or prospects, and then work out how to resource them later. And something that's been key is collaborating and building on the shoulders of others. So with the ERDF project, effectively, we asked some neighbouring organisations running ERDF projects if we could see their documentation packs, and said, do you mind if we copy it effectively? And that saved us thousands of pounds and thousands of hours probably. And, you know, I don't see that really as plagiarism. We were all very transparent about it. It's more, you know, efficient use of resources. So running projects, definitely maintaining firewalls and allocating the resources between your funded project, core business. So we do some QuickBooks, so we have different cost codes, and you can see income and expenditure for different projects. Your core business is all very separate, and that's important for funders as well. Keeping within budget obviously is very important, and I feel like we're trusted to research and, you know, deliver on to benefit others. So you've got to see yourself as a responsible steward of somebody else's money. Keeping in close communication with the funder, flagging up issues and delays early. You know, obviously through COVID, there's been unforeseen issues that have come up. So we've, in the case of NextGen, you know, communicated if we've got delays or, you know, unforeseen things coming up. And also I've set up a internet business in the past. I've set up a few businesses that, you know, you've got to accept that pioneering projects, there's going to be failures, there's going to be delays. You obviously try and avoid those, but seeing them as learning points is, you know, a good positive mentality, because you learn more by reflecting and adapting from failure. Monitoring and reporting, NextGen again was designed to be supportive of the community energy sector, so very light touch, well, relatively light touch monitoring, which has been very welcome compared to the RDF, where, you know, it's like the Spanish Inquisition. You don't know when they're going to turn up. They can turn up at your office and say, show us your evidence for the last 2 or 3 years, which kind of keeps you on your toes or paranoid, I think. In terms of reporting, regular updating reports and budgets as you go along. You know, you might have to do a report after 3 months, but actually I'll update it and the budget every week or two, so that you're quite current with it. And I mentioned keeping separate budgets separate, so different profit and loss accounts, so you don't mix expenditure and everything can be auditable. And one last thought is be aware of the potential long lag, I call it, of reporting requirements. So you might be asked to, you know, present at a conference 6 months after you've spent your last budget on a project and you moved on to other things or do further reports, etc. Keeping back some budget for that is actually quite important. And I'm probably at about 10 minutes. So yeah, feel free to contact me for any questions or further discussion. And that's my email. So thank you.
Perfect on the 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Damian.
Great.
Yeah, very interesting run through funding options. Thank you. Great, so slightly behind, so I'll just move swiftly on to the last speaker in this session, who is John Taylor, who's from the Greater South East Energy Hub. So I hope, John, I can see him here. So yeah, looks like he's getting started. Thanks, John.
Great, morning everybody. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, good, I'll get going. Right, like Kate, I'm overseeing the Rural Community Energy Fund for the Greater South East region. So we cover basically the donut of counties surrounding London from Hampshire to Norfolk. I'll be covering the trends we're seeing over the past few years running the Rural Community Energy Fund, particularly around renewable heat. So we've actually probably majority of our applications now are either solar PV or renewable heat projects, and there's probably 4 types of heat projects that we've had through the scheme. I'll just go through the various kind of project models we've been seeing. So probably one you may have heard about, it's got quite a lot of media attention, this one, is the village of Swaffham Prior in Cambridgeshire, who have been undertaking a high temperature heat network. So very common on the continent in Denmark and Scandinavia and other places, but not so much in the UK. This is an off-gas grid village, very much on heating oil. So a community land trust in the village wanted to address this problem. So they got a stage 1 feasibility study from the Rural Community Energy Fund to look at, could we potentially do a whole village heat network? So this is the image here is one of the outputs of that. So a map was drawn up, land identified for an energy centre, and then routing for the pipework to be run around the village so every home could be connected to this centralised heating source. The design they've settled on is going to be a ground source heat pump, coupled with an air source heat pump and also a solar farm, and integrating into that energy centre. And then water will then be pumped around the village, probably around 70 degrees. And then each home will then have a heat interface unit to draw off that heat supply. Again, people will be able to get rid of their oil boiler, and then they'll have a contract with this kind of centralised heat network as a heat supply basis. So very similar cost to the household on an annual basis for their oil heating, but yeah, very much decarbonised. This approach does require a lot of upfront kind of feasibility work and investment, and in fact this has probably evolved beyond just the means of just a community energy group delivering it on its own. So in this case, the Community Land Trust has partnered with the County Council, who were the landowner, fortunately, for the energy centre and the borehole array. So because the County Council were brought on as a partner, they were able to access funding from the Heat Networks Delivery Unit and HNIP funds to help with further business development and construction finance for the heat network. Planning permission's been accepted, and they're going to be, I think they're constructing it at the moment. In terms of replicability, we're hoping, well, we do believe that the follow-on scheme for those government heat network support programs, the Green Heat Network Fund, would be eligible as a next step for RCEF applicants to get some help with the construction finance. And that's called the Green Heat Network Fund. You don't necessarily have to partner with a local authority to access that anymore, but I would argue it does help just with experience. And there's also the RCEF eligibility means at least 50% of a project has to be owned by the community energy entity. So you can bring in private sector partners or public sector partners for this sort of project model. And obviously with things like renewable heating, we're still waiting on the replacement scheme for the renewable heat incentive, which is again is a big factor here. The second project type we've seen is low temperature heat networks. And in this case, we worked with Village of Firle, Brigton, Besco led that in East Sussex. And this was looking at a concept called a shared loop ground source heat pump. So rather than like before, we had one network for the whole village, we actually had clusters of smaller networks around the village. And in fact, so there's like 3 or 4 borehole loops serving different sectors of houses. But the difference here is instead of having a centralized heat pump, each home has a small heat pump, which you then individually connects to that shared ground loop. So a bit more familiar from the household's point of view, and they have kind of a central heating system in the home with a heat pump. But then that shared asset is outside, kind of spreading that kind of high capital cost of the ground loop and boreholes across the community. Coupled with insulation improvements, again, a heat supply contract drawn up with the homeowner. In this case, it's purely led by the Community Energy Group. So they access both Stage 1 and Stage 2 funding through the Rural Community Energy Fund, which so at Stage 2 gives up to £100,000 to help with planning, applications and business development. In this case, it was the village had a single landlord, which definitely helps with things. We've also seen this as a popular model with housing associations where they own a whole cul-de-sac or street of homes, or even tower blocks, a very good model for this sort of technology. Again, we've managed to through feedback from these sorts of schemes, we've got the shared ground loop eligible for the Green Heat Network Fund. If you aggregate at least 100 homes across the village on various shared loops, that's eligible. And again, yeah, hopefully there may be a business model where you can split out the ownership of the heat network, the shared loop, which can go for the Green Heat Network Fund, and then the individual home heat pumps could then be eligible for either domestic RHI for the next few months or the Clean Heat Grant, which looks promising. The third project model we've had through, again, a bit like private wire connection with the solar farm to a large energy user. This is the same concept, but just using heat. So we work with Made Energy, who initially looked at, we're doing a water source heat pump here for the Thames Valley Athletic Centre. You can see the River Thames just running next to the site there. Yeah, looked at a water source heat pump as an option, but ended up a ground source heat pump, coupled with rooftop PV on the roof already. Quite a simple project, this one, but it really, yeah, good energy and carbon savings. Stage 1 study was enough to see it through, and then Made Energy did a community share offer to finance the installation. And the fourth project model, getting smaller again, is there a community model for retrofitting heat pumps in domestic homes? So we did a study with Forest Row and other now partners in Community Energy South Region in East Sussex to see, is there a model where an ESCO can actually finance domestic heat pumps? So this involved surveying rural homes for heat loss and their suitability. Could you negotiate bulk discounts by contracting and procuring lots of heat pumps in one go? We've seen this with work with solar panels, like Solar Together. And again, yeah, could a community share offer or some finance work as a loan or ownership model where a householder wouldn't have to pay the upfront capital costs for a heat pump? So currently you could potentially have the householder sign over the renewable heat incentive income to the community energy ESCO, and then there may well be a model around the clean heat grant. A few lessons we've learned from that, particularly the domestic household model, is we're really waiting on the heat and building strategy to signpost the way forward for renewable heat. So we're really close to making some of these heat projects work as community business models. These are the factors we need to, yeah, the sensitivity is quite crucial. And so currently electricity is too expensive. There may be hope where there's talk about removing the social and environmental taxes off electricity costs, which currently make up about 24% of the tariff, and that would help massively. Oil and gas are also arguably too cheap, although given what's happening recently, that may well be changing. Installation costs are still too high, but again, this could well change if, yeah, there's real commitment behind heat pumps. We'd hopefully see the industry investment in training and manufacture bring down installation costs. And then, yeah, there's the cost of finance. Again, if you can bring the cost of finance down from 4 or 5% closer to 0 to 1, 2%, that would again greatly enhance the business models. Local climate bonds may be an option, partner with the local authority who have the ability to do a municipal bond. We've seen several councils do this already. And Lewis and Eastbourne councils in this Sussex area again are piloting, yeah, hopefully a municipal climate bond, which could well support, yeah, renewable heat rollout. So that's me done. Yeah, link to the website there, email address for questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, John. Yeah, it's good to get the heat in into an event. Yeah, coming at community energy from all different directions today, which is exactly what we want. So that concludes the first session. Thank you to all 4 speakers. Hopefully it's been interesting to get an insight into what's happening now in the sector, the projects which are in development and have being implemented right now. That was the purpose of the first one. So what we're going to do now is have a break. So yeah, go and make yourself a coffee, check on the kids, check your emails. We are going to restart in session 2 at 11:40. just a reminder, yeah, 11:40, so that's the time to be back by then. What, as I said, we'll do earlier is we'll leave the Zoom open, so you don't have to log out and log back in if you don't want to. Just pop back and join the next one at 11:40. We look forward to seeing you then. Thanks. Thank you for sticking with us. As I said, this is Community Energy Now and Next, starting session 2. It's lovely to see so many of you still here, and just because of the format of the event, what I'm going to do now is just a quick mini intro, because I know that several people have joined since while we've been on the break. So I'll just run through the event itself. So for those that are joining us for the first time, Community Energy England is the only organisation dedicated to representing and supporting the community energy sector in England. We exist to help active community energy organisations implement new projects, innovate, improve and grow. The event that we're running today is in partnership with the Next Generation programme, which is funded by Power to Change. The programme aims to help the sector innovate, test and develop new business models to deliver more holistic, integrated local energy services, and is working with 11 organisations to do this. We've also worked with the 5 energy hubs, which supports organisations across England to identify, develop and implement energy projects. The energy hubs are supported by central government and overseen by the local energy partnerships in the various regions. So the purpose of the event today is to combine learning about viable current business models that can be adopted by existing community energy organisations and new entrants, with exploring the increasingly complex multi-technology and multi-partner projects that extend what community energy is capable of delivering as part of the transition to a zero carbon energy system. So the day is split into 4 sessions. We've had session 1 earlier, many of you were there, and this is session 2. Each one has significant breaks in between, so this is designed to prevent Zoom fatigue and allow time for you to keep up with your other commitments during the day. So after lunch, we have session 3, which is about the importance of a whole systems approach to community energy, and session 4, which is about driving forward local area energy planning innovation projects and the whole systems approach. Sessions 3 and 4 will each have a discussion session in breakout rooms afterwards, giving you the opportunity to reflect what you've heard in the talks and share your own experiences and opinions about the content of the event. So we hope you'll stick with us and join in this afternoon for those. So now, however, I would like to begin session 2, in which we'll be looking at pathways to more community energy with a focus on local authorities. Now, I was looking for Keith earlier. I couldn't see him on the list. So Keith, can you make yourself known if you are here? Because you were due to be the first speaker. But if Keith isn't around, I think Emma's just going to, try and get hold of Keith. Check he's coming, and then if not, I'm sure that Pete will be able to take over and we can swap them around. We definitely have Pete here, yeah. So just give 1 second for, well, more than a second, but give a minute for Keith to see if he can join us. Maybe Pete, could I ask, would you be ready to go first if we can't get hold of Keith?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. We'll just, no answer. Okay, great. Yeah, if that's okay, Pete, we'll kick off with you. So yeah, I'd just like to introduce our now first speaker, who is Pete Capener, who is from Bath and West Community Energy, a stalwart of the sector and Deputy Chair of the Board of Community Energy England as well. So I would like to hand over to you now, Pete. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Philip. I don't have any slides, so I wanted to talk through three points really about our relationship with local authorities and provide a bit of guidance or ideas about how we can develop partnerships for the long term for local authorities. So a bit about building a strong foundation for partnership. We'll last touch on navigating politics and also think about a bit about future potential particularly with a focus around income security, which is a key kind of issue of interest at the moment. So foundation, we clearly, with local authorities, people change, administrations change. It's important to think about partnerships with local authorities as long-term things and build a foundation that will last. In our case, we took the approach of establishing a cooperation agreement with one of our local authorities, our main local authority, which has been really successful, really successful. A lot of the success that we've had to date as Bath and West Community Energy has stemmed from our partnership with local authorities. So that cooperation agreement doesn't actually spell out any work program or even much detail. Counterintuitively, it's very bland as a statement, as a document, but that's its real strength, because it's enabled us to get political support for community energy. It's enabled us to secure support from officers. So they've been enabled to work alongside us because of the cooperation agreement. And it's created opportunities for partnership projects that we wouldn't otherwise have had. So the no work program, no detail thing, which might seem like a constraint, has actually been one of its real strengths. So we've as a result of the partnership agreement, developed projects with schools where the local authority sent out information to all the schools saying, work with these guys, they're good. If you want solar on your roofs, they've invested money in our projects. And importantly, over time, we've developed a relationship with planners that is now feeding into the latest local plan development, where there's planning policies directly supporting community energy, putting material weight on community ownership within new projects. And all of this has been built up over time as we've built confidence and trust in each other, but also understanding of interests shared or otherwise. And I think that particularly around investment and acting as a local authority, acting as a convening role in working alongside schools and other partners, businesses, that credibility and trust has been critical to the success of those initiatives. And I think the navigating politics bit is linked to all of this, because we've been through 5 administrations since we started in 2010, and 2 Conservative, 2 Lib Dem and 1 coalition. And each of them have had their own particular interests, as you would expect. But it's been really important for us to adopt a non-party political approach. Political, obviously, but non-party political wherever possible. And that's come down to taking the approach that we would take to communities more generally, i.e. Matching message and communication method to the audience, to the way that politics is done as well, and the way we engage with politicians. Clearly, politics is an even more tribal kind of process than working in a communities, and we've had to be careful about language even, and at times it feels quite petty, no longer calling ourselves a social enterprise, having to call ourselves a community enterprise. But it is just about matching message to audience ultimately. But the more important risk is to avoid being seen as being captured or owned by a particular party, particularly in an area where politicians kind of come and go, and we've had many different administrations. We've had to work quite hard at times when a new administration comes in to avoid being seen as being part of the previous administration's kind of policy. It's even been the case when one administration was involved in setting up the cooperation agreement. They went out of power, then came back in again and forgot all of that, even though it was only a matter of years ago. So it's very easy to become too identified, which is major risk when we're in the sort of area that we're in. But all of this kind of foundation is really now, I mean, it's been really important in building the projects that we've done, £20 million worth of projects over the 10 years, lots of solar, ground mount, rooftop, hydro, and also flexibility projects. We're now running demand side response, battery storage, all of this. It's kind of really strong foundation moving forwards, and where the potential is, that partnership, we're now pushing even further in looking at negotiating long-term power purchase agreements with the local authority. So for grid connected solar, in this case, we've secured funding from the Southwest Energy Hub's RCEF programme to do feasibility studies looking at three ground-mounted, relatively small ground-mounted solar schemes. In order to make those work, stack up, they need to have income security over a long period of time. And so we've been talking to the local authority about those long-term power purchase agreements, looking at both sleeved power purchase agreements and synthetic power purchase agreements. Not got the time to go into the detail, but importantly, from a synthetic PPA point of view, it provides additionality to the local authority, which is what the local authority wants to see, that their actions are actually generating new renewables in the local area, but helps also from procurement point of view as well. So there are approaches that we're looking at. Part of the funding is enable us to work with Burgess Salmon lawyers, going to quite a lot of detail about advice on that the local authority needs to make this sort of approach work. And we're going on the coattails of other local authorities that have got further than us, like Devon and Bristol and Plymouth, which we'll be hearing a bit more about later, I think, as well. So there's quite a move, I think, within local authorities I'm seeing to move towards this sort of approach where you're almost creating local CFD, local contracts for difference, which enables local renewables to work in a way without subsidy and without having to rely on this crazy volatile wholesale market, which whilst it's really high now, is probably not going to be in a couple of years and can't base long-term investment decisions on. And finally, if I've got a minute, or Philip, just in terms of building that partnership, moving towards these PPAs, there are some critical things that we've needed to take into account. One of the most important is around decision-making cycles. It's not like we're setting up a PPA with a commercial counterparty. There's detailed decision-making processes, long-term decision-making processes that feed into policy and politics that need to be integrated. And so you need to go into it with appropriate expectations. Excuse me, and this is a long-term process, but as part of that, it's vitally important to be really, to raise up both risks and benefits from the local authority's point of view, because there are both. And it's critical, because it's a long-time process, that you make sure expectations are clear at the beginning, because the worst thing is you go to the end or after 6 months of negotiation and suddenly the local authority realises a risk that they didn't know was there, and that puts the total kibosh on it. So raising up risks as well as benefits is critically important to us as well as to the local authority. And internal champions are really important, and aligning policy, not just around sustainability, but around economic development, looking right across the piece, property services. And again, finally, going back to the cooperation agreement, that provides us the foundation to do all of this, working across different departments and engaging with people from the legal team through to the sustainability team. So finding that foundation is critically important starting point on which to build all the rest of the future development, which I hope will be really exciting. Income security is just one part of it, but I think there's a whole range of other issues which don't have time to go into now, where local authorities can play a critical role alongside community energy in moving towards this net zero transition. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pete. Really helpful introduction and overview. I'm going to challenge you with one question, which was in the chat, and see if you can manage it. It feels like putting you on the spot slightly, but I know you're a man of lots of expertise. So the question is that you mentioned synthetic supply in your talk, and I wondered if you could just define that for us, because some people will be new to it.
I'm sorry, that was probably a mistake to kind of mention it in detail and specifically, because it is a big subject, but try to say that.
Sorry, it's Alistair from Devon County Council. I'm going to be talking about synthetic PPAs in my presentation, so I can do it then, and I've got some graphs to help. So excellent,
thank you.
It's like we'd planned this in advance. Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, Pete. Really appreciate it. And glad to say that we do now have Keith with us. So I am going to share Keith's one minimal slide.
Thanks, Philip.
Keith, great. Yeah, I'll hand over to you now, Keith. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Is my volume okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. Well, sorry, I'm a little bit late joining. Had a few technical issues this morning. But good morning. My name is Keith Hempshall, and I'm in the local and community empowerment team at the Centre for Sustainable Energy in Bristol. On the topic of pathways for more community energy projects, I've been asked to say a few words about a recent study that we did for the North East Local Economic Partnership, which is just a picture on the right-hand side, and that report can be found on the CSE website and also on the North East LEP website as well. So the report was for the LEP in the North East, and it was also for a number of local authorities, North Tyneside Combined Authority, Durham County Council, and South Tyneside as well. And what the LEP and those authorities were interested in finding out was how they could better support and stimulate community energy in the North East. So this is an example of these authorities coming and saying, actually, we want to support community energy. How do we do that? How do we best do that? And they did that because I think, as Pete mentioned, there was definitely sort of a sense that there was a strong sort of political will for community energy in the North East, and some really strong champions, I think, who were sort of politicians as well as within the authorities themselves. And they had a recognition that sort of in the North East, there's fewer community energy organisations. If you look at things like the Community Energy England's State of the Sector report, you see that there's only a couple of organisations represented in the North East region, and that's quite considerably lower than most other areas of the country. So thinking about the wider sort of applications of the study and some of the things we looked at, I thought it would be helpful today just to sort of maybe focus on 5 key conditions for successful community energy that we considered in the report. And these weren't the only conditions. There were quite a lot of different factors that we thought would influence sort of successful community energy. But these were the 5 that we prioritized. And I'll just say a little bit about what we found out and why they were maybe important to the authorities that we were doing the report on behalf of. So the first one here is the voluntary community social and voluntary community and social enterprise sector. So the authorities were really keen to know that sort of community energy was widely supported and was something that sort of a broad range of organisations across the Northeast region were interested in. They wanted to see that sort of there was potential scale and reach if this was a sort of sector that they invested in. I mean, what we found in the Northeast that the support was definitely there amongst organisations, but I think the really key takeaway we took from it was that a lot of them felt quite isolated. It seemed like people were siloed, and it was actually sort of, there was a real lack of connection between organisations. People didn't know who to turn to for advice on different areas, and yeah, who else was interested. So what we helped to do in the report is to sort of identify the voluntary community sector organisations that were interested in community energy, and to sort of share back with the local authorities who they were. The second area we looked at was sort of business models, and we know this is really tough sort of area in the post-FIT sort of environment. So we sort of broke these down. So we had sort of we looked at 3 areas. One was sort of your archetypal sort of community energy projects, for example, with an asset ownership and energy generation. The second one we looked at was sort of these scale models. So I think there was a presentation this morning from Dave Green and Sharenergy, who run sort of the big solar co-op. And this sort of these models, sort of, I think there's a few more of them around now, but they help to facilitate cooperation between different communities and to bring scale in that sense. Obviously, there's lots of advantages to that. And the third area we looked at were innovation models, which would be sort of your pilots and research projects, which a lot of community energy organizations are interested in and offer value. So each of those 3 models, we were saying, adds value back to the local authority in slightly different ways. And yeah, through the report, which you can have a look at, we identified some examples of models that were sort of applicable with the right support in the North East. The third area we looked at was skills and capacities. And I think what's really worth highlighting when we talk about community energy and engaging with sort of local authorities is that sort of there are definitely some gaps and support required, but actually our assessment of the voluntary community and social enterprise sector in the North East was that there's a huge amount of social enterprise, community engagement, lots of organizations already delivering projects. So there's lots of skills and capacities already available, which local authorities can draw on. But yeah, obviously there are sort of some gaps and limitations and areas of support that are required, and we really found sort of around that. Often it's the combination of actors. So there are 2 quite prominent universities in the North East, for example, and who are really interested in doing sort of practical projects, but the linkages hadn't quite been made and the network wasn't there to make those sorts of things possible. The fourth area we looked at was sort of local policy and national policy. So this, given that the sort of the sector in the North East wasn't well connected, we found that sort of obviously there were quite a limited number of supportive local policies, like the kind of policies that have just been described in Bath, in local plans to support community energy. But the thing was, a lot of local authorities in their climate emergency strategies are still at quite an early stage. So once you get down into the detail of sort of how some of those targets and ambitions will be met, like there was a feeling that there was more space for community energy, and that actually the really key thing there was sort of building those platforms and that engagement between the organizations that were interested and the local authorities. The final area we looked at was sort of what investment and support mechanisms might be possible and what really worked. And we found in the North East there were 2 main sort of support mechanisms for community energy. There was RCEF and there was support from Northern Power Grid. And what we found, like the biggest thing I think sort of take away from the investment and support mechanisms was sort of around alignment. So what we felt is that like the current investment and support mechanisms weren't necessarily aligned well to the current business models or the skills and capacities sort of the organizations in the North East. So that was really a key conversation that we had with the local authorities, and also how there might already be examples of support that existed that the organizations that were interested in weren't already aware of. So there was enterprise support, for example, which a lot of the social enterprises weren't actually accessing and aware of. So we really felt like when we had the conversations with them that there were sort of 4 areas to work on, and that was beginning with sort of building a network in the North East around community energy. It was about supporting the sort of the early stage exploration of new sort of projects and business models, and it was also working on the policy areas. So actually having conversations around sort of key areas of climate emergency strategies where community energy could support. And the 4th area was about sort of providing more support to community energy organizations. So the report was delivered quite recently, so and I think it was quite well received. So we're looking forward to seeing more community energy in the North East, and hopefully it's gone somewhere to establish some strong pathways for success.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Keith. Great overview there. And yeah, those two, the report itself and an executive summary, if you need a shorter version, are both available. I think those links have both been put in the chat. So yeah, encourage you to download those and take a look. That's very fresh. I think that was last week or the week before. So yeah, brand new report with that kind of data and evidence in there, which I'm sure will be relevant to local authorities, community energy organisations, and others in any region of the country who are looking to stimulate more community energy activity. So, yeah, definitely take a look. So, thank you very much, both of you, two, for the first part of this session. I think we do have a couple of minutes actually for questions. So, if anyone has a question for either Keith or Pete, and you'd like to raise your digital hand, we'll probably just take one. So yeah, if you go down to the bottom of the Zoom screen, there's a reactions button, and then you can raise your digital hand, and then great, we've got Frankie Ashton, I think. Yeah, Frankie, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, I always take a while to do the unmuting bit. Sorry about that. Yes, I wonder, I mean, people like local authorities like Hackney, not many I know, but some have actually established their own local authority energy companies to develop renewable low carbon energy projects in their areas, particularly perhaps in terms of direct heat delivery. I wonder if you see that sort of initiative from the local authority sector as a competitor, an alternative, or as somebody you can work hand in hand with? That's it.
Great question. Great question. I don't know whether Keith, do you want to answer? Shall I?
You go, Pete.
Okay. So I think it's a great question. I think that for me, if I was in a local authority that was doing that, we are going through some similar conversations locally. I would suggest that it's done in partnership, because I think there's a synergy between community energy and local authority working together that would make that sort of initiative work so much better. And it feels to me like a missed opportunity if it's just done purely on a local authority basis. However, I know that many local authorities are keen to look at ways of generating value and carbon reduction locally, and are more used to being doing it themselves. That's just the culture within the local authority, and so it's a challenge to look at it as a joint venture. But I think if it can be done as a joint venture, then it would work very, very much better. And I could go on and talk about how we do that, but probably not got the time now, but very happy to have another discussion about that.
Thank you very much. And perhaps I could get in touch if that would be all right. And we could talk about it.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you both there. Yeah, I'm afraid I need to keep us moving on. So, Kayla, I'm afraid I won't have time for your question, but I see that you can talk to Pete in the chat if that's okay. So, yeah, I'm now going to move on to the second half of this session, which is titled How to Approach and Work with Your Local Authority. So, similar themes will continue, but I'd like to first introduce the first speaker, which is Alastair Mumford, who's from Devon County Council. So the idea was that we'll get some different range of approaches and experiences, and as you can hear, Alistair is from a local authority himself, so great to get his input. So yeah, Alistair, if you're ready, I will hand over to you.
Yeah, you can hear me okay, Phil?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak, and Pete's excellently set me up for this one as well. So my name's Alistair Mumford from Devon County Council. I'm also a volunteer director at Exeter Community Energy as well, so straddling both camps. So I wanted to talk today about the synthetic power purchase agreements, which is, there's a whole range of types of power purchase agreements, and this is just one type. And there's also seems to be a few different ways of talking about synthetic power purchase agreements. You can call them contracts for difference, PPAs. Anyway, for today, we'll call them synthetics. and SPPAs to save on time. So the reason why we sort of came about this was that I wanted to try and get the council to, well, the council has got a policy to achieve, well, for 30% of our total energy consumption to come from renewable energy. It's currently about 4%. And we've got to get to 30% by 2030. So I was just sort of looking around for ways that we could do this. And that sort of slowly but surely brought me to synthetic PPAs, SPPAs, which is, I'll say for reasons in a minute. And I think it is, as Pete was saying, it's a bit of an opportunity, a different way of doing things. And I think it's an opportunity for other local authorities, public sector organisations and the community energy sector to get more renewables onto the grid. So I'm just going to quickly share, because it is a little bit easier if I can do it with some diagrams. So I think hopefully you can see that now. So our conventional is it presenting? There we go. So the conventional way that we've got energy at the moment, so we've got Devon County Council there down in bottom right. So we buy energy, we get energy from Empower through the laser framework. We obviously pay for that. We've got some renewables that we've also got as well on some of our buildings, and we get the energy from that and the renewable energy certificates, the REGOs, and obviously some of that energy goes into the grid. That's all fine, and we're very, very happy. Well, our procurement colleagues are very, very happy with the supply from Empower because it's pretty cheap compared to if we were doing it through other frameworks and so forth. What we're looking to try and do now is to move over to a sort of different way of doing it, because we've essentially got the same thing, that Devon County Council can be buying energy from Empower, but separately to that, we can enter into a synthetic power purchase agreement with a developer, which would mean that we get the REGOs, the renewable energy guarantees of origination. So we get that, so we can waive that certificate in the air and claim the carbon for that. But that developer is actually going to be having a contractual relationship with the wholesale market. So they will be selling electricity onto the wholesale market and then obviously getting money back from that. So in terms of sort of electrons, we're not involved with that. We're just buying those REGOs, those carbon credits. So the synthetic power purchase agreement, in some ways, it's not really a power thing. For us, it's a carbon offsetting. It's a way of offsetting our carbon emissions, because we're going to be buying those REGOs back, and it doesn't affect our current relationship with Empower or whoever the framework supply would be. So the wholesaler in this situation, then they go to, sorry, not the wholesaler, the developer in this situation will go to the wholesale market every year or whenever they do it, and we'll get a price for the electricity that they're selling onto that wholesale market. So I don't know what it is at the moment. It used to be about 45, 50 pounds per megawatt hour. I imagine it's, well, who knows where it is at the moment, and it probably changes every second. So they've got that money coming in. Now, what the synthetic PPA does is a Devon County Council in this situation will go to the developer and say, well, look, what's the minimum price? What's that price that you need to make this all stack up? And then that would be the strike price. So they would say, the developer would say, okay, yeah, we need at least £50 per megawatt that we generate, otherwise this just isn't going to work. And so we'd say, okay, all right, well, we're going to guarantee that you're going to get £50 for every megawatt that you generate over 17, 20 years, the life of the agreement. And so then when the developer goes out to the market, and they may go to the wholesale market, and the wholesale market may be buoyant, and they may get £70 per megawatt hour. And then what would happen then is that difference, that little bonus, would come to us, Devon County Council. So that's that cash flow line there. Now, if they go to the wholesale market and they don't get their £50, it goes down to £30 per megawatt hour, then that's where Devon County Council would put their hands in their pockets and say, well, look, here's the money to bring it up. And so this graph here sort of shows, so you've got over the term of the agreement, There may be some times when DCC is paying the developer, and then maybe sometimes when the developer is paying Devon County Council. And so with that, as Pete was saying, the developer can get confidence that this is going to, that they're going to get an income over a period of time. They haven't got to deal with all that volatility that can happen in the energy markets, and it's probably going to get more and more volatile as the years go on. So this was just sort of looking at some of the Bayes forward price scenarios, which I think probably, well, I'm sure Bayes always know that they're not really worth very much, these the cost scenarios, and at the moment they're a bit crazy, but it was just to give us some idea within us. And we looked at the high, medium and low in terms of us entering into an agreement with a community energy group. And for us, it looks like it would probably be, so for Devon County Council, it probably would be cost neutral. There would be about £37,000 over the 17 years income for Devon County Council through an SPPPA. But really at that amount, a council of our size sort of says that's just cost neutral. If we get the sort of stress testing, so if we get the high or the medium, it does get a bit scary. So if prices really crash, then it could cost us about £4 million. If prices go ridiculously high, then we could be earning about £1 million. So there is some risk in there, but and fortunately, it's not for me to make that decision. I'll get rid of these slides there if I can stop sharing. So that's essentially it. It gives that surety to the developer. They can then go and get their money's all sorted out, and we can get that carbon. And that's where, in terms of the benefits to a local authority or any organisation, is that they can, well, as I say, cost neutral at no cost at all. They can do a substantial amount of carbon offsetting, and the cost of carbon offsetting looks like it's going to go through the roof as more and more people are looking to try and carbon offset. So to me, it feels like a very good opportunity for a public sector organisation to do that. It also, there is a potential for a bit of a partial hedge there. So if energy prices drop, then obviously from Devon County Council's point of view, our cost of energy is going to fall as well. Now, it doesn't totally match up because the wholesale price isn't the retail price. You know, the retail price is the wholesale price plus all those lovely levies and subsidies. So there isn't a total hedge, but there's a little bit of a way that we can de-risk the investment itself. But as I say, I think it's a really cost-effective way of doing carbon offsetting. The other thing from our point of view is if we can do it with the community energy group, there's a massive benefit to the local areas. So we CAG Consultants did a piece of work for us, and they determined, well, I'll quote them directly, using cautious and well-evidenced assumptions, we estimate that the additional benefits of community energy would generate an additional 15.27 million in economic value to the Devon economy. So that shows how, compared to a commercial model, the community model is far better for the local economy. So what the benefits to a local authority for us is that we can get the carbon offsetting. Also, the synthetic power purchase agreement, it's a financial instrument, so it doesn't need to be procured. So we can say we want community energy and we want local energy, and that's what we're going to get. We don't have to do an open tender and have to comply with public procurement regulations, which would stop us being able to stipulate that it's community owned and it's in Devon, although there may be some relaxing of that with changes to public procurement regulations at the moment. But yeah, so it's win-win really. There is a bit more work that needs to be done in terms of the carbon accounting. So obviously carbon offsetting is a bit like the wild, wild west at the moment. We do have the, what was it called, the Greenhouse Gas WRI, World Resource Research Institute or something, which has come up with some guidelines. And so we do need to speak to them because they haven't got any specific guidelines around SPPAs. But because we got those REGOs, those Renewable Energy Guarantees of Origin, you know, Devon County Council would buy those, or whoever the public sector organisation would buy those and then rip them up. We feel that you can count the carbon offsetting there. So I think that's probably it. Obviously, if there's any questions. Oh, and just to say, we're trying to put together a sort of toolkit for other people as well. So We've got some of the legal advice. Also, Bath West are getting some more legal advice around heads of terms. So hopefully we'll have a little toolkit that other people can use. And we're working with the Southwest Energy Hub on that as well. So thanks to them for that. So I think that's me, Phil.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alistair. That's very interesting and has stimulated some questions in the chat, which I don't have time for, but I hope if it's okay that you can go and take a look at those, some questions about risk yeah, in terms of cutting out the kind of the middleman. So yeah, it'd be great if you could engage with those. Thank you very much.
I'll do that now. Cheers.
Lovely. Thanks. Great. And now we have another Alistair. This is Alistair MacPherson from Plymouth Energy Community. Again, quite a well-known organisation within the sector. And so Alistair is, I hope, going to now come on to talk to us.
Thank you, Philip.
Okay, lovely. Thanks so much, Alistair.
Thanks for inviting me to be here. I think my brief is how would you approach your local authority and how would you get them interested? And when asked this question to talk today, I was kind of going, haven't we been here before? And we have. You know, it is an ongoing theme, you know, throughout the conversations around, you know, how do we stimulate and grow and scale community energy? Is how do we unlock the magic of working with local authorities? I think I've been asked because you know, we have managed to unlock a bit of magic in Plymouth, and so I think that's kind of why I'm here today. So I've kind of took this opportunity to reflect again in terms of what it is that's kind of made it work at Plymouth, and I took the opportunity to actually go back to senior managers within the council and go, well, what is it? You know, what is it that works for this relationship for you? So I'll share that reflection in the course of this 10-minute slot. So quickly, yeah. I'm Alistair MacPherson. I'm the Chief Executive of Plymouth Energy Community. We've been around since 2013. I'm also a director of a Devon-wide community energy organisation called Devon Energy. And yeah, we've been, you know, PEC is now, I guess, we're an established entity. We've got 6 megawatts of installed generation across ground-mounted solar and a range of rooftops. We've got a programme of outward engagement and behaviour change work, and a huge team of people doing fuel poverty advice and retrofit advice work in people's homes. So we've kind of got past that kind of start-up stage and now in the kind of running to standstill stage almost. I guess where we're at the moment is we are developing a new ground mount solar scheme as a joint venture with Plymouth City Council. We are got a sort of raft of rooftop projects that we kind of get over the line. We've just completed a significant programme of domestic retrofit, 130 households, fuel poor households in the city, supported with just under 200 retrofit measures in the last 12 months. Each of those households get an average grant of about £9,000. And we're on the way to Glasgow to take our massive, amazing kind of community energy, community art and energy installation to Glasgow called Moss to a Flame. So we're currently assembling that and going to take it up to Glasgow to be there for COP. All of those areas of activity have involved partnership with the local authority in one form or another. So, and so the Plymouth City Council were involved in the initial kind of setup of PEC. And then since then, I guess it's been a kind of growing kind of responsibility, a growing kind of relationship of I guess, of a child growing up and leaving the household. And so we're currently at the stage of like being, I think, probably a mature teenager, a young adult, where we're kind of trading with the local authority on an equal basis, kind of thing. It's no longer them nurturing us. We're definitely in a world where we're kind of finding joint benefit from that. So from that background, what can I provide as, I guess, a reflection on how would I approach the local authority? First of all, our experience, it was born of a time. We were right time, right place, right people, and a range of ingredients came together that were kind of, got the Plymouth scenario off the way. So it's not something in cookie cutter, but there are some kind of key things that were kind of central to, I guess, the partnership working. And one of those, I think, is effectively understanding the context of local authorities. And so for me, the ability of, I was, what I haven't said, I was a local authority employee for 19 years. I'm no longer a local authority employee. I'm now a fully community energy sector employee, but for a long period of time, myself and other people that were working for PEC were also had one foot in the local authority and one foot out of the local authority. So we had great understanding of local authority context. And so my first point of advice for anybody approaching a local authority is have sympathy for that context. They're not easy places to work. And, the days where it's a kind of cushy job, sitting there, waiting for your salary kind of thing, it doesn't exist, particularly in the space of the local authority where you're kind of trying to get in. It's a challenging place. There are these significant pressures of austerity and ongoing cuts and hollowing out of local authorities, and energy is only a very small part of their responsibilities and fairly low down the statutory list of things that they must do. So you've got to understand that. I think, so that's point one, have sympathy for that and understand that. Pete's already talked about play the long game, so I'll not talk about that, but I wholly support what Pete says about, this is about establishing a long-term relationship with an entity, and you need to do it in a kind of apolitical way. I think when you're doing that and you're thinking about approaching a council, stop talking about it as the council. Now, I sit in lots and lots of community kind of settings and organisations, I guess associated with the VCSE sector. And the amount of times I kind of shudder as somebody says, oh, it's the council's job. And it might well be the council, but that statement, when somebody frames the council in that way, I think it reflects a deep misunderstanding of actually that complex stakeholder network, which is a local authority. So the council is the political side of the council is the bit that owns the property, the council is the bit that kind of deals with the planning and regulation, the council is also often the commissioning agency doing advice to vulnerable households, the council is the planning department. So there's multiple different kind of stakeholders within that. And you need to kind of be I guess a little bit smart to that in terms of like playing what message you play to the different things, and understanding that whilst they probably should all be speaking to each other, they aren't. They are often very different silos. I'm happy to be shut down, and if any local authority sitting on the call saying no, it's a completely different place where I work, please let me know. But that's my experience in terms of I guess working alongside councils. Think about them as quite different groups of people that you need to bring with you and sell your message to. Within that, and when you're making that approach, you need to be kind of looking for allies. And I think you need to be looking for allies that are both the foot soldiers, but equally people within the senior management or the political ranks, and like playing your messaging to those. Clearly having some kind of people that are doing stuff is really important, but being able to go in and kind of build allegiance at a kind of senior management, executive level, political level is also really important. We were fortunate in Plymouth to get both working in consort. You get officers, politicians, community kind of working on the same kind of journey, and we continue to play that. But it's not an easy juggling match. We've been through changes of political administration, had to change things as in relation to that. But yeah, so having both, I think that's key as a listener. So try to find ways in at different levels. And Pete talked about his partnership agreement with Bath and North East Somerset. Similar to us, we have, I guess, a kind of what we call a collaboration plan, which puts some high-level principles on the table, which are actually not full of detail. They're big, they're bold, they're simple, big ideas that's relatively easy for people to say, yeah, that's an area for us to work on, to build partnership projects around, kind of thing. So, and that helps, that kind of longer term collaboration plan helps to build with some of those points around, dealing with changes in political kind of power and control, builds cross-party allegiance, and gets the kind of senior management elements of the council kind of aligning with why is it we're talking to a community energy organisation? What is it brings? What are they bringing to the table, and how are we kind of working with them?
So 1 more minute, please, Alistair.
Yeah. So last one was again around credibility. And I think was mentioned earlier, the word of credibilisation. It's difficult to get started, but I think it is important that you put before the local authority an idea that is reasonably credible. Local authorities should be social activators. They should be there nurturing the community's little ideas and great ideas and bringing them to fruition. In reality, they can't, they don't, not in my experience, they haven't got the capacity to do that. So it really needs to be quite a well thought out and credible offer when it lands at the local authority's doorstep. They don't have the capacity that the RCEF kind of, or the hubs teams maybe do to nurture community energy groups, or another funder like Redress or National Community Lottery Fund. You know, those organisations have people there to take people's ideas and shape them a little bit. This doesn't really exist in local authorities. I don't see that capacity. And so going with a proposal that looks like one that you might put before your bank manager really is a good thing in terms of proving credibility. So those are my 5 points about building opportunity, building local authority. The landscape is richer than ever, I think, for opportunity for that, and local authorities are probably more receptive to that. You know, the wider political landscape are to kind of more local place-based solutions. We're seeing more and more funding recognising the role of local government coming back there. We're seeing European funds hopefully being targeted back towards local kind of place-based things, and with those being increasingly targeted at the low carbon transition skills and stuff. So it's a rich landscape, I think, and so hopefully one that we'll see a growth of community energy in. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alistair, for your clear guidance and the benefit of your long expertise. So yeah, that brings us to the end of the second session today. Thanks everyone for joining and listening. And what we're going to do now is we'll have a long break actually. We've got lunchtime now, so plenty of time for you to go off and make something nice to eat. The next session will start after lunch at 1:30, so you have 1 hour approximately to take a break. And what we'll be talking about later is the importance of whole systems approach to community energy, so starting to engage with some of that innovative and more expansive understanding of what community energy can do. So we look forward to seeing you in 1 hour's time. Yeah, back at 1:30, please. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's lovely to see so many of you still here. It's great to have you as part of the event today. We are now moving into session 3, moving from the more focused and practical morning that we had to look at some more expansive aspects of the energy system, how it's changing and how the community energy sector can be part of that. So as I did before, I'm just going to reintroduce the event because I know that some people are joining for the first time. So, yep, welcome back. And I'll just introduce Community Energy England in case you're not familiar with us. We're the only organisation dedicated to representing and supporting the community energy sector in England. We exist now to help active community energy organisations implement new projects, innovate, improve and grow. The event today is in partnership with the Next Generation programme, which is funded by Power to Change. They aim to help the sector innovate, test and develop new business models to deliver more holistic and integrated local energy services. And the Next Generation programme is working with 11 organisations to do this. We've also worked on the event with the 5 energy hubs, which support organisations across England to identify, develop and implement energy projects. The energy hubs are supported by central government and overseen by the local enterprise partnerships in their regions. The purpose of the event today is to combine learning about viable current business models that can be adopted by existing community energy organisations and new entrants. This was the focus of the morning session, with exploring the increasingly complex multi-technology and multi-partner projects that extend what community energy is capable of delivering as part of the transition to a net zero or a zero carbon energy system. The day is split into 4 sessions, so we've had 2 of those already, just as you know, coming back from lunch. So yeah, session 3, we're going to talk about the importance of whole systems approach to community energy, and in session 4 we'll continue to sort of talk about driving forward local area energy planning innovation projects and a whole systems approach. So at the end of this session and the subsequent one, session 4, there will be a breakout room discussion. So that means that we'll split you into rooms. There'll be a facilitator in each room who's got some questions and things that can help things moving along. But it's your opportunity to reflect what you've heard today in the talks and share your own experiences and opinions about the content of the event. So we hope you will join us for those discussions. So I would like to now start session 3. The first speaker who's going to talk on the topic of what is involved in the whole systems approach and why community energy organisations should learn about and engage with it is Jodie Giles, who's from Regen, a very long-standing member of the community energy sector and someone who we're delighted to have here with us today. So without any further ado, Jodie, if you are there and ready, which I think you are, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Philip. Hi, everyone. I hope you've had a good morning if you've been joining Community Energy England this morning. And yeah, it's really nice to be with you this afternoon. My name's Jodie. I've been working at Regen, leading our community and local energy programme for nearly a decade now. As I prepare to leave my role at Regen, I'll still be on the board of South Dartmoor Community Energy, so I'll still be part of the community energy sector. But I'm going to make some reflections on a decade of working in this sector and some of the lessons that will help us use the next decade to make a real difference to climate change. I'll be talking about the importance of whole system approach to energy, collaboration, engagement, and increasing our ambition. And as community energy organisations, I personally think we're already really good at thinking about whole system because we are motivated by having a social and environmental impact on the energy system that we're using. We think about the impacts on people rather than the impacts on consumers. We think about people as people, not as consumers. And so we're very good at generating electricity, using surplus money generated from that energy generation to fund fuel poverty alleviation. There's some really great examples of that you will have heard about this morning. Plymouth Energy Community, South Staffordshire Community Energy are really great examples of that. We think a lot about heat and how we heat our homes. The Carbon Co-op People Powered Retrofit project that we're going to hear about, BESCO's Rural Heat Network project. You know, there are so many good examples from this sector where we're already starting to think about the cross-sector interactions between electricity and heat. We haven't done quite so much on transport, but I know you've got an example of that coming up this afternoon, and there's increasing ambition and interest in that area from this sector, and we've seen that from this year's State of the Sector results. Community energy organisations were really pioneers in local supply and system balancing. We've thought a lot about delivering energy efficiency, retrofit, how we address fuel poverty. We're thinking about this in a really holistic way already. And really the rest of the energy system as a whole is sort of playing catch up with us. They've traditionally worked in a much more siloed approach, a siloed way, but they're working now on large scale innovation projects. So an example of that is the Innovate UK Prospering from the Energy Revolution programme. It's £104 million. It's got some massive flagship projects as part of that. There's also the BEIS Domestic Demand Side Response programme. There's innovation funding through all of the distribution network operators out there. And some communities have been involved in those projects, and really even some of them have been leading them. So Carbon Co-op led a project with the Domestic Flexibility programme by BEIS, looking at Power Shaper, how we can alter our demand in response to signals from the network. And others like Chase Community Solar are taking part in Zero Carbon Regionally, which is a detailed design programme of smart local energy system. But we need to recognise how far we've come. We have a seat at the table now, and we have professionalised a lot as a sector in the last 10 years. Community energy is very much business as usual in the language that businesses, distribution network operators, government and regulators use. You know, it's part of their everyday terminology now. They didn't know who community energy organisations or what community energy organisation was 10 years ago. So we've come a long way in the last decade. And these organisations, thankfully now finally are actively seeking out our participation and involvement in their projects. But there's also a risk that we're left behind, that we undervalue what we bring, or that we try and overstretch ourselves by doing everything. we need to be really focused on why community energy is important in the whole energy system, and focus on the value, the specific value that we bring. What's our unique selling point here? You know, we've talked a lot as a sector about being the trusted intermediary. You know, we know that new technology and systems are coming or are already here. We already have some time of use tariffs. There's type of use tariffs coming. We're already interacting in flexibility markets and smart home technology and appliances. But how do we ensure that everyone who engages and benefits from this system change, that it isn't just the people who are the early adopters, the people who are lucky enough to be able to afford the swanky electric cars and the heat pumps and the solar panels? And that's where community energy has a massive role to play. But that will only be of value if we've already engaged widely and we already have those networks within our own communities. And that means starting those conversations with our friends and neighbours and family and developing that trust. Another area where we have a unique ability to influence this sector as a whole system market is to use the small amounts of flexibility within our own systems and our own homes. One of the features of a whole energy system is that we optimise and use the system we have more efficiently to avoid building bigger and more costly systems, and being more flexible with when and how we use, for example, electricity, which could enable more low carbon generation to connect into the system. And thirdly, we have a social conscience. You know, we provide the social conscience to the energy system as a whole. We think about the real impacts we have as the system changes, how it impacts people's lives in real people's homes and businesses up and down the country, and reflecting those bottom-up impacts and insights back into policymakers and regulators, system operators and businesses is really important as we change this system. So we need to be laser focused on these aspects. And our role in the whole energy system, you know, we can't be experts in everything. There are lots of really good businesses out there working on smart tech and systems and minute areas of technology that will help us get to net zero. But we have to focus on the things that we're really good at, and we have to collaborate with all of those businesses, organisations, local authorities, DNOs to achieve the impacts that we want to see. So as I said at the beginning, as I prepare to leave my role at Regen after nearly a decade, there's some lessons that I wanted to share with you that I've seen happen. You know, I've seen our sector demonstrating time and again. Engaging widely and building trust has been absolutely fundamental. I've talked quite a lot about that. I think we need to be much more ambitious. We need to be thinking much more bigger, because the speed and scale necessary to decarbonise now is absolutely vital, and the climate won't wait for us to learn from small projects. We have to get involved in big innovation projects now that give us the budget to pay ourselves, to build our capacity, to be equal partners in the whole system projects that are happening nationwide. These projects are happening, they're an opportunity for you to professionalise and get really, really involved. And thirdly, we have to be much better at recording and demonstrating the social and environmental value of the work we're doing at every stage. So the financial value of a whole energy system approach is so far proving to be quite low. And that means we need to focus more on the other benefits that are being delivered from thinking about this system more holistically. So an example of that is the Power Shaper project I mentioned earlier, which Carbon Co-op led. We did some analysis for Carbon Co-op as part of that project on the value from participating in distribution level flexibility markets. And the availability from each household would generate between £1 and £25 per year per household. There's not massive amounts of money. So how are we going to make this system and this model work if there's such small amounts of money involved? It's not going to be a financial proposition on a per household basis. So we need to think about the approach for each household and become experts in brokering and helping people use low carbon technologies, systems and retrofit to stack all the bits of revenue that could be achieved in each area to make a self-sustaining business model. And this isn't going to make us rich. It won't be easy, but it's definitely better than the alternative of not doing everything we can to avoid catastrophic climate change. So really, I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing. It's working. Please think big. I urge you to think about that speed and scale of change that's necessary. And I really wanted to say I've really, really enjoyed working with all of you over the last decade, and I really hope you'll stay in touch. So thanks for listening, and if you've got any questions, very happy to answer them.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jodie. And yeah, we are very pleased to have Jodie here, given that she is departing the sector. So it's a real pleasure to have her as part of the event. Jodie was very brief, so not very brief, she was just slightly briefer than she needed to be. So if anyone has a question and would like to raise their digital hand, as before, if you go down to the bottom of the Zoom screen, reactions, and then you click on the little hand where it says raise hand. If anyone does that, I can ask a question to Jodie, or you can ask a question to Jodie. Yep. First in there is Duncan Botting. So if you'd like to unmute and ask your question, Duncan.
Hi, Jodie. Excellent presentation as normal, and well done for what you've done throughout the decade. I suppose one of my biggest bugbears in the community area is the lack of ability to do peer-to-peer trading still. You know, at the level that we are at now, and the length of time that we've been at this, I've probably been at it slightly longer than yourself with the grey hair. Do you see a way of creating a movement to actually force government to move the pace along on this? Because it's been touted for years, but has never actually occurred.
Yeah. Good question, Duncan, and thanks for your comments. I don't think we're going to be able to force government to do anything. You know, I've been saying to the community energy sector for many, many years, if we want to make a change here, we're going to have to do it ourselves. The policymakers and regulators have proven that they aren't helping us, and the rhetoric is starting to change, and they're saying some very nice words, but we're not seeing a lot of demonstrable action coming out of the government. So in answer to your question about peer-to-peer trading, where do I sit on that now? I think the really important thing is to think about the value. You know, what is it that we're really trying to achieve here? And is it that we want to be able to sell power to our neighbours and generate a little bit of money for ourselves? Or is it that we want to, you know, avoid catastrophic climate change and do something about social justice in the energy system? And you have to really think about those questions yourself and challenge yourself on, is selling a little bit of power to my neighbour really going to help solve this crisis overall? Is that the best way to achieve the outcome that I'm trying to achieve? How do I best achieve that social and environmental value that I want to see at a local level? And I know that some of the big smart local energy system projects that I mentioned are working on platforms to enable peer-to-peer trading. And there are some innovation projects that have tried to develop those types of platforms, but we haven't seen the kind of cost savings that we would like to see coming forward from those projects. And I'm not sure, to be honest, whether they're scalable enough to achieve the types of impacts on climate change that personally I would like to see, and the energy justice that I would like to see from the system change that's happening.
Thanks for that. I think I just add that I think the lack of the whole systems aspects have actually not been taken into account in many of those projects that you identify. So the ability for us to save infrastructure over long distances is not being taken into account. The ability to actually take into account local capability in terms of not sharing just electricity but heat. So all of this peer-to-peer aspect, I think, is really interesting. I'll let others go, but
have a look at
thanks very much.
Thanks, Duncan. Have a look at the Cornwall Local Energy Market project, because they did try and do this, but it hasn't been replicated elsewhere yet.
I work with Matt very closely, so I know it. Yeah,
great.
Cheers.
Lovely, thank you very much. And unfortunately, yeah, sorry, not time for more questions. I do need to move on. But as you can see there, someone with the depth of knowledge and expertise like Jodie, if we get started talking on something as complex as peer-to-peer energy trading, it shows how expansive the energy system is. And that is what we're all here today to kind of engage further with. So yeah, thank you very much, Jodie, for being here and joining us, and all the work that you've done for the sector over the past decade. I'm sure, as some comments in the chat, but I'm sure lots of people are really sad to hear that you're going, and we hope that the new sector you're part of benefits in the way that we have from you.
Thanks, Philip.
Brilliant. So I'll now move on to our next presenter, talking about kind of introducing us to a whole systems approach. This one is a little more practical and particularly focused on a project. So yeah, without any further ado, I would like to introduce Sally Murrall-Smith, who is from TRESOC, which is down in, I'm going to say Devon, and now I feel like I might have made an error of that. I actually don't know where that is. Is it? Oh, Jodie's nodding, great. Yeah, I'll hand over to you, Sally, if you're ready to speak.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. Totnes Renewable Energy Society is indeed from Devon, so thank you. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen straight away, if that's okay. I've got presentation. Oh, and it's not in the right place. Sorry. There we go. Right, thank you. Okay, so TRESOC is a community energy company, and we have 550 local shareholder members. We about 94% of them live within 10 miles of Totnes. We have 47 rooftop PV installations, which we own and operate, and we have shares in a small hydro. In 2019, Transition Homes Community Land Trust approached TRESOC to become the energy supply company for the progressive eco-housing development Clay Park. This is a diagram of what the housing estate will look like. The Transition Homes has planning permission for 33 highly energy efficient eco-homes, and this is 27 houses with 2 of the houses split into flats, a community building and a community laundry within that. 70% of this housing is affordable, so that's a mixture of affordable rental and shared ownership for local people in housing need. The current planning permission is for 160 kilowatts of rooftop PV and a microgrid. And however, Transition Town Totnes has just put in, sorry, my dog is barking like crazy in the background, if anyone can hear this, the joys of working from home. Sorry, so Transition Homes have just put in a new planning application for another 8 market houses, as when they did all their sums for the project, it came in over budget. And this really is the reason why TRESOC were approached to join the scheme, is that Transition Homes designed a really beautiful, environmentally friendly and socially equitable housing development, but they just couldn't afford to build what they wanted. So they had to value engineer some things away. And one of those things was the energy system. So they outsourced this to TRESOC, which not only is a way of reducing the build costs, it's also a way of bringing local community investors on board with the project and engaging them through local ownership of this energy system. So TRESOC, way we finance our renewable energy projects is through community share offers. And this one will be, the Clay Park share offer will be open to potential residents of Clay Park, local residents from Totnes and Dartington communities and TRESOC members. The key aim of the project is to maximise the use of on-site renewable electricity and provide residents with low-cost green electricity at about 10% less than the grid price. At the same time as being able to provide a decent return to local community investors, about 3% with their investment being repaid over 20 years. In 2020, we applied, well, we won a Rural Community Energy Fund Stage 1 feasibility grant for £30,000, and this was to do the technical and financial modelling, to check that the project was technically and economically viable. And this was we had positive results for this, and we applied for a stage 2 development grant from RCEF, and we were awarded this in April this year. So really the project's just kind of getting going really. This was for an eye-watering £80,000. We have employed a multi-systems approach. We, in terms of systems and technologies, many were considered during the feasibility study, and the feasibility study determined that the optimum technology mix would be a microgrid, private wire, 160 kilowatts of roof-mounted solar PV, high levels of insulation, electric vehicles, thermal stores, and battery storage. However, on my presentation, I've got in brackets unlikely next to this. And this is because one of the challenges of the project is that we changed engineering consultant from the feasibility study to the development grant. And so our original consultants proposed that the project should be made battery ready because batteries are just too expensive. And so there would be a plinth and there'd be cabling and the legals would be done so that when the price of batteries drops or that there is a grant available, we could install them. However, now our new consultants, Bureau Happold, are determined to use 100% of the on-site generated green energy on-site. And so they don't think that we'll need battery storage, which is great. So the multi-system approach makes the Clay Park project very complicated, and because of this, the development costs are high, so £80,000. And without this grant from RCEF, really would be completely unaffordable. For example, there are over 20 different legal documents that are necessary for installing the project. And so although the project doesn't exactly provide value for money in terms of generation capacity versus cost, RCEF recognise that it will generate a great deal of knowledge capital in terms of a new community business model and the official documents. So a part of a specific requirement of the stage 2 grant is for knowledge sharing. So once we have demonstrated that the model works, we will be promoting it to the energy sector more widely. And TRESOC have given up all intellectual property rights, and we will share all legal and technical documents online, which we also intend to make into templates. But ANSI are our legal consultants, and they are going to be producing the legal documents. And then Sonia Bedford, OBE, has kindly offered to convert them into templates. A microgrid working group has been set up through Devon Community Energy Network, and as several other Devon Community Energy groups are also looking at microgrids at the moment. So we will use that network to disseminate information. And our next meeting is on the 12th of October, if anybody's interested. I expect that the templates will also be available through the DCEN website. In terms of conflicts, during the scoping, we considered heat pumps, but they were just simply too expensive. So they would double the cost of resistive heating. And from TRESOC's point of view, they really broke the business case. So they really cost a lot and reduced the electricity so much that there wasn't a business case. So we looked at transition homes paying for them, but they really have no additional budget. So the only way they could do that would be to reduce the costs of the build by reducing the insulation in the partition walls within the terraces, which they, after a great deal of reflecting on, they rejected this approach and decided to opt for a fabric first approach. So the technology choice debate illustrates one of the conflicts of the project. Energy saving and creating affordable housing is at the heart of the project, and the most expensive technologies will save more energy in the long run and produce cheaper bills for the residents. However, they're just too expensive at the moment. And similarly with TRESOC, carbon saving is at the heart of what we do. But there has to be an economic business case for us to be involved. Otherwise, we just can't raise the investment from the local community. So without TRESOC's involvement in the solar, the project wouldn't be able to pass the SAP 10 building regulations. So the project potentially wouldn't go ahead. So our new consultants, Bureau Happold, have suggested an energy services approach in order to maximise the on-site green electricity. And this means, this is for hot water heating and potentially ambient heating. And for hot water, this means that every resident will be given supplied with a tank of hot water each day. And it's up to them when they use it. However, the heating of the tank is centrally controlled, and this enables TRESOC to optimise when this is done, and it will be heated in the day from solar rather than using grid imported electricity overnight. And this is really a trade-off. People are giving up the freedom to decide when they're going to heat their hot water in exchange for cheaper energy bills.
Sally, I'll just interrupt to ask one minute more, if that's okay.
1 minute, okay. I'm gonna skip this because you've probably all read that bit. Okay, so in conclusion, the multi-system approach has many social, environmental, economic benefits, and we hope that we will be able to demonstrate a replicable business model for delivering low-cost green electricity to housing estates, including affordable housing estates, and at scale, which is vital in the transition to a low-carbon future.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Sally. I think the level of detail there is really significant and shows how complex these projects are, but it's great to get an insight into the one that you're working on. Thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of time, I will actually need to move on, I'm afraid, with I know you've kindly offered questions, but if you're okay looking in the chat, because I think a couple have come through there, if you're okay replying in the chat to some of the questions, that would be great, Sally. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much to both of those first two speakers. It's great to get an introduction into the overall sort of sector-wide view of whole systems projects, and then focus in on one complicated one that's in development right now. So the second part of this session is going to move on to local area energy planning, in particular to look at the opportunity of that and the relevance of it to the community energy sector. So I am delighted to start by introducing one of my valued colleagues, Duncan Law, who's the Policy and Advocacy Manager at Community Energy England. So he's going to start this second segment by introducing us to local area energy planning. Over to you when you're ready, Duncan.
Thank you. I think I am. Can you see presentation?
Yes, that's working. Thanks.
So my brief. Yes.
I'm just checking we've got you on camera. I can't see you. Yeah, looks like it. I'll just highlight you now. Sorry, Duncan. Do go on.
Thanks. So my brief. If I can move my slide on, which is resisting moving. I beg your pardon. I don't know why it's resisting moving. There we go. Yes. Is to look at what local area energy plans are how do they work? Are they a good opportunity for community energy organisations, and can they help the sector gain prominence among multiple stakeholders and become embedded in planning for the future energy system? Sorry about this. This is really clumsy since buttons don't work. So just to give a heads up, the concept of local area energy planning was kind of invented by the Energy Systems Catapult in response to the need to transform our energy system and the direction that was going. And if you go to the Catapult website and search local area energy planning, lots of interesting short and long documents come up. We did an event in November of 2020 on what is local area energy planning and how can community energy be part of it. And if you go to our previous events pages, you can click through to a YouTube of that event where the Energy Systems Catapult presents, and I have to admit to having stolen some of their slides for this presentation, and also a link to the outputs from the discussions on the benefits, opportunities, challenges and barriers and what we should do about them, which is below the YouTube video. So as a result of that, and we've basically asked that community energy be put at the center of the local area energy planning model and be embedded in the next iteration or pilot. More on that later. So transformation of the energy system. This is an Energy Systems Catapult graph of what the transformation might look like. And as you can see, a huge yellow wedge of electrification in the middle of heat and transport, the two great challenges that we haven't really touched so far. A large chunk of hydrogen, which I think is probably Cadent getting in there to protect its gas distribution assets. But as you can see, that's a huge challenge and going to be very expensive. And you've seen this before, the transformation is away from a centralized delivery of power generated in power stations to a much more distributed system where energy flows in all sorts of directions and much more opportunity for local control and management is provided. So the Energy Systems Catapult is trying to be holistic. It's trying to break down the silos between parts of the system, generation, transmission, distribution, buildings, and the consumer, trying to break down the silos in the energy system, which are often related to the delivery vectors. The heat is mostly oil and gas, some electricity, and to make sure that the trade-offs or the advantages from thinking about them as one system are realized in the transition, and then obviously joining up the things that are still in development around, oh, I beg your pardon, this is really nightmarish, around digitization, system transformation, markets and policy. Just to be more specific about the trade-offs, if we're going to electrify heat, it's really important that everybody doesn't come in from work at 5 o'clock and go, the house is cold, switch on the heating, because that's the peak time for all other electricity demand. And it's important that they don't come back from work and plug in the electric vehicle. So if we've got a house that can store energy, which is delivered at a peak time, and we're not demanding it because it's lacking, then we can spread the load out. We can save billions of pounds in reinforcement, and we can have a system that is less likely to fall over. One of the things they identify is what has to happen where and when in this very urgent transition, and it's much better to do it once and do it right. And they've also identified that to be cost effective, the solutions will be dependent on place. And this is partly because every place is different, every setup, every configuration, every housing type, constraints on the network are all individual and location specific. And we say this is a huge opportunity for us, because local is where it's at for so much of the energy transition. The needs, the constraints, the challenges are individual. Assets and buildings belong in a place. Partners and collaborations around activity are going to be a lot of them local. So many of the sort of flexibility opportunities are best done in a distributed way. Retrofits about buildings, energy saving opportunities about people and buildings. Demand side management, reduction, more of that. Community involvement, we need to be changing people's attitudes as to what is acceptable, how much, you know, and getting them to be willing to be disrupted to make these significant changes. And most of people's purchasing decisions about energy are made locally, and the equipment they buy. Transport, a lot of it's local. Local authorities are key to this, and you know, we know more about how our local authorities function or don't in this area than many. So it's a huge opportunity for community energy. So nuts and bolts, what is community, what is local area energy planning? Well, it's 7 steps, and you can see what they are, but in this model, it begins with engaging local stakeholders. The problem is, in the model as it exists at the moment, there is almost no mention of community energy. And all the benefits that we would identify, you can see it's not there in any of those green, blue or pink banners. The advantages of engaging community energy are largely not understood. Pardon me. Yes. This is nightmarish. The model has been piloted in 3 places: Bridgend, Newcastle and Greater Manchester, under the Smart System Heat Programme funded by BEIS. And here is a very brief example of what it can offer. This is a map of Bridgend, and you can see on the left the current state of, in broad terms, the way the energy works. So pink is district heat, yellow is electric heat or hybrid dominated, and blue is electric. And then on the right is the opportunities that presents in terms of district heat, red, ground source, air source, hybrid opportunities. And this can be right down to street level, and it can be related to things like substation constraints. And then plans can be evolved in the local area. If we've got a substation constraint there, how do we get around it? Do we do heat storage? Do we do electricity storage? Do we reinforce the substation? Do we put in generation? So it's a way of getting the data and then working out what the local solutions around that very granular data are. A method has been created by the Centre for Sustainable Energy for Ofgem and the Energy Systems Catapult, and it's very detailed and very good, but virtually ignores community energy again. It's there as somebody who should be consulted at the stage of getting to, you know, engaging local stakeholders, but it's not there as a fundamental partner. And we say it should be in at the beginning. We should be there defining what the robust evidence is, looking at the technical data that is supplied by the DNOs, looking at what the possibilities and opportunities are. And then stage 3, making sure that the social process emphasizes that people are at the center of it, and that social benefit is one of the significant outputs of the transformation, rather than something that might accrue. So what are the opportunities for community energy groups? It's a huge opportunity to be in at the beginning of identifying what the best strategic local projects that need doing now are. So it's a potential work stream for you all. It can build relationships and joined up working, and it can produce a consensus around a direction of travel. New access to information from DNOs, local authorities, partners, new sites and synergies, new connections with big players in the energy market, whom we could help, the health service, big commercial businesses in the area, possibly access to funds, an indispensable role in the planning and delivery process, and some of these are laid out below. I think we can have a unique role in connecting with local people, in convening and facilitating, in getting long-held knowledge that often isn't there in local authorities, and certainly isn't there in DNOs in most cases, of what's happening in a local area and what the needs are, and so on. So can it help the sector gain prominence among multiple stakeholders and become embedded in planning for the future energy system? Yes, it can, absolutely. And if it builds better relations and info sharing with the partners, the significant partners in the local energy system, it should, especially if well convened by community energy groups, produce friendly and constructive relationships. And then the visibility and the vital role that community energy can play is more likely to be more evident to all. Jodie said, we have a seat at the table. We don't yet, I don't think, have a de facto seat at the local area energy planning table. But I hope Jonathan Atkinson, who has been more involved at a practical level, will be able to correct that perception. So what's happening? In our work with the Energy Systems Catapult, we asked as a next stage from our event a round table with key statutory stakeholders on how community energy can be embedded in local area energy planning. That has yet to move forward. The ball is in their court. We keep batting it back into their court. Plymouth Energy Communities, Ockley Energy, Transition Eynsham area have volunteered to pilot with their local area, but they can't do it for nothing. So at the moment, we're still waiting on permission. But we discovered recently that a pilot with Energy Systems Catapult and the UKRI in Greater Manchester has involved the Carbon Co-op from the outset, and that was early 2020, something they didn't tell us at our event in November 2020. So there's a certain degree of non-joined upness, I feel, going on in the people who are trying to promote this joined upness. And then Oldham Energy Futures, which I hope Jonathan will tell us more about. Finally, a reprise of the things where you can look further for information, Energy Systems Catapult and previous events on the CE website for the video and the notes from that event. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you very much, Duncan. That was a great whiz through of local area energy planning. So hopefully that's introduced it to those of you who aren't familiar with it and given you a bit more detail if maybe you have heard of it already. One of the things, what I'm going to do now, I'm afraid, is just discuss straight on to to hear from Jonathan Atkinson, who Duncan mentioned. Jonathan has been working on local area energy planning with his organisation Carbon Co-op, as Duncan also mentioned. So yeah, I'll hand straight over to you, Jonathan, if that's okay.
Yeah, I know we're running a bit behind time now, so I'll do my best to kind of save that time. And yeah, Philip gratefully said that I could do this without presentation, without kind of slides, which is quite liberating, but it also means that I've just been sketching notes as I've been listening to other people speaking. So yeah, but let me go through, yeah, Carbon Co-op, just a little bit about who we are. We're an energy services and advocacy cooperative based in Greater Manchester. We work around the UK and around Europe as well. Our membership is mostly in Greater Manchester, and we help people and communities to make big savings in their domestic energy use and make an impact on climate change. Most of our work to date has been around retrofit and energy efficiency, and our people-powered retrofit service is now being capitalised in a community share issue. I've put a little link in the thing there if you want to read more about that. We also do a lot around energy systems, and it was really good to hear from Jodie about the Power Shaper work that we've worked on with Regen. Power Shaper is our domestic demand-side response service in development. We also do a number of other things like an integration to smart meters and that sort of thing. So on the energy system side, we have developers and engineers and all sorts of people involved. What I would say, Jodie mentioned about viability of those services, and while stacking different services together is totally a part of making them viable. What I would say is that with both energy systems and with retrofit, we need to be developing capacity now for markets that will be coming in the future, because it's not just community energy groups that struggle to make demand side response stack up. It's a sector-wide issue, and other elements of the sector, private and public, are building their capacity. So we need to build ours, so we're there to take advantage when those markets become mature. I'm not going to repeat much of what Jodie said, but I think community energy brings legitimacy and to a sector which is in transition and lacks legitimacy often. We've seen like pushback from various different elements of civil society, not just here in other bits of Europe, when big changes are made without the consent of people. And in a system that's too centralized and too privately orientated, it lacks legitimacy, and you see people just simply won't partake in those changes. So having communities involved, people and communities, organizations is key to that. And also trust as well. I would say community energy organizations have an inbuilt competitive advantage, which is trust. People are more likely to trust us to come into their homes, whether it be changing how they use energy or to retrofit their homes, because by our very nature and by our very governance, we're not for profit, and we involve people in those systems as well. So there's lots of different things there. One thing I want to highlight with local area energy planning, I always get those two mixed up, is the importance of trying to enable people, citizens, to be involved in that process. And one little example there was that very quick mention by Duncan of hydrogen. When we're involved in these different processes, the local area energy plans in Greater Manchester, we can see the horse trading that goes on between different elements of the system, the political elements, the distribution systems, and around things like hydrogen. And a nod and a wink, like, oh, we'll let this through, give us that. It's super important that communities are involved in these debates and discussions, because they have huge impact on how our towns, cities, and countries and counties will look in the years to come. Hydrogen networks are not cheap; they're quite invasive, high, capital intensive things. And if we're not involved in those discussions, and if we don't enable people and citizens to enter into those political discussions, which are just not purely technical, they are political, then we're cutting people out, we're losing legitimacy, we're losing trust. And I've seen in the chat there's some discussion about the politics of these plans. Local area energy planning is, simply put, is planning our energy systems for the 2030s. And it's not just our energy systems in and of themselves, but in a geographical context. So there is a locality to that. So it's about people and places and the energy system, and how those things interact and evolve and change over the next 10 or 20 years, and the investments that go in now. A comment I'd like to make about the energy systems catapult. They are one of the catapults. These are arm's length government organisations established by government to trade in the market. The National Audit Office did a review of the catapults and found them to be a quite immense, huge waste of money. And there is an inherent conflict of interest here with the catapult. Catapult is proposing a model for local area energy planning. At the same time, they are then selling themselves as consultants to deliver those plans. So there is a huge conflict of interest there, and it's really important that community energy is there to call out that conflict of interest. It sort of speaks to kind of some of the flaws that Duncan talked about in like how those plans are developed, how they're created and developed. And so how can community energy get involved? Well, government, local government and national government are involved in these local area energy planning processes. It's really important that the politics are there, are leveraged by community energy organisations, and that we demand a seat at the table and we demand involvement. In Manchester, there are two things going on. One is the Greater Manchester Local Energy Market, which is one of the prospering for the future energy system, energy revolution, innovation, large-scale innovation things. We're one of the partners in that project. We've been involved since the start of that project. It is around creating a vision for energy system in the 2030s. Again, the Catapult weren't involved in that bid, but they've kind of involved themselves as time's gone on, and that's part of that conflict of interest, I would argue. The Oldham Energy Futures, there's a link there in the chat. This has been initiated by ourselves, by Carbon Corp, and this is to provide a counterpoint to a top-down local area energy planning process, where experts get involved and they decide on behalf of people what should happen in their area. We're inverting that system. We're involving people using a series of creative, collaborative workshops in helping them devise area plans for their own area based on their own priorities and their understanding of the system. For us, that's really important. There are huge challenges in that, though. One is that creative engagement with people to get them to a space where they're able to engage with these kind of complex issues. The other is that engaging in the politics of it all, because the politics need to be made open to people to understand. And there is a thing there. And the simple thing is like time and money as well. These involving people takes time and it takes money to make that happen. It's an active process. That's why we've been lucky enough with this funding from the Google Foundation to do this work. What we're hoping is that we create a bit of a demonstrator, a bit of an example of what can be done and what is possible, and how plans that involve people can have greater legitimacy, can be targeted towards their needs, and have greater level of kind of trust and take up as well. So there's a few links there in the chat. Do have a look. Hopefully it's whetted people's appetite a bit for this area and give you a little bit of an understanding about what's going on. Cheers.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Yeah, really interesting insight from, again, yeah, one of the most experienced people in the sector. So what I would like to do now is move us on to the breakout rooms. So we're, as Jonathan mentioned, we're slightly behind time. So I'm just going to quickly explain what's going to happen. We have my colleague Charlotte, who is about to press some buttons, and that will split everyone into some different rooms. We have quite a number of very kind facilitators who've agreed to be part of the session from that perspective. So you'll have at least one of those people in your room. They're equipped with various questions, and hopefully they will take some notes during the discussion or just kind of jot down things afterwards. So that we can kind of record some of the things that you've said and the key points or issues or concerns that you have. The idea is really to talk about what you've heard today and where you're at as an organisation and your role in the sector or as a stakeholder. So yeah, please participate actively in the discussion to the extent that you would like to. What the practicalities are that we'll have to split everyone into the rooms, and then Charlotte will have to shuffle the facilitators around. So just bear with us there. Charlotte will send a message when kind of everyone's in position, but I'm sure once a facilitator knows that they're in a room, they will, well, no, they should wait actually, because they might get shuffled about. So just give us a couple of minutes to arrange that. If it's okay with everyone, I mean, you don't have the opportunity to object, but I will just take 5 minutes from the break so that we have a little bit longer to discuss. And yeah, so without any more talking from me, Charlotte, I hope will be ready to press the buttons. Hopefully that gave you an opportunity to chat with some others in the sector, get some different perspectives and share some of your views. It's not the only opportunity to do that. We'll be repeating that process after the next session, again, with a little more input in terms of the more complex parts of the sector and the innovative projects, which we'll hear about in session 4. So yeah, we're going for another break now, and the event will resume, let me just double check, at 3:15. So just got just under half an hour to go off and again, make a cup of tea, check on the kids, check your emails. And we look forward to seeing you for session 4, which will look at how we drive forward the local area energy planning we've talked about, the innovation projects we've talked about, and the whole systems approach that hopefully you have all been introduced to now over the course of the day so far. So we do hope you'll stay with us and join us back here at 3:15. And again, a discussion session to follow afterwards, so more opportunities to learn from each other and share your views. So thank you for your participation so far, and we will see you at 3:15. So, hi everyone, welcome back. It's time for the final session, 4th and final session of Community Energy Now and Next. It's great that so many of you are still here. We're really delighted to have you as part of the event today. I would like to just do what some of you will now be familiar with, which is go through a little introduction, just because I know that some people will have joined us for the first time for this session. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Community Energy England, we're the only organisation dedicated to representing and supporting the community energy sector in England. We exist to help active community energy organisations implement new projects, innovate, improve and grow. The event that we're running today is in partnership with the Next Generation programme, which is funded by Power to Change, and the programme aims to help the sector innovate, test and develop new business models to deliver more holistic and integrated local energy services, and is working with 11 community energy organisations to do this. We've also worked on this event with the 5 energy hubs, which support organisations across England to identify, develop and implement energy projects. The energy hubs are supported by central government and overseen by the local enterprise partnerships. The purpose of the event today is to combine learning about viable current business models that can be adopted by existing community energy organisations and new entrants. We heard about those more in the morning session. So if you missed those, they'll be in the recording that we'll share later. We're mixing that, we've been mixing that information and expertise with exploring the increasingly complex multi-technology and multi-partner projects that extend what community energy is capable of delivering as part of the transition to a zero carbon energy system. So we started on that more so in session 3, which was the one before this, and we're going to now move into that session 4, which will kind of extend what we've already started to talk about in terms of introduction to whole systems and various of those projects, as well as local area energy plans. So, yeah, I'd like to introduce the first speaker of session 4. The first segment is on key barriers to innovation project financial viability and replicability, particularly when other organisations may be able to get around these projects or have different approaches. So we're going to hear from 2 really interesting projects today. The first one is Ben Dodd, from Green Fox, who's going to talk to us about an EV car share project that they're working on. So I haven't actually checked if Ben is here. I hope he is.
I am, I think. Can you hear me now, Philip?
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ben. I'll hand over to you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Philip, for inviting me to speak. I'm planning to be reasonably quick, as I'd like some sort of questions at the end, and so we'll see how we get on. My name is Ben Dodd. I'm one of 6 directors at Green Fox Community Energy Cooperative, based in Leicester and Leicestershire. Set up in 2012, Green Fox is best known for its renewable heat project in a large secondary school in Leicestershire. We installed an 800 kilowatt biomass boiler and PV, and we had 2 share offers raising just shy of £1 million. We had a special purpose cooperative that did that, and we have 200 members, and we saved the school substantially on their heating bills by going through biomass. And we helped set up a wood processing facility in the National Forest with ERDF money, and that funded and created employment, which is still ongoing. And it saves just under 500 tonnes of CO2 annually, which is where it's at really. It's all about heat and how we decarbonise heat. Working more recently through the Next Generation programme, we investigated the idea of zero carbon schools and how do you retrofit primary schools through energy efficiency, PV, taking advantage of tariff changes and ultimately air source heat pumps to totally decarbonise schools without increasing the energy bill at the school. Huge challenge. We worked on it with the Energy Systems Catapult, as was mentioned before, Loughborough University, Leicester City Council, and 4 primary schools in the heart of Leicester. The project's just coming to an end, and we will publish and circulate the findings. But this is another good example of a whole system approach. However, don't be disappointed, but I'm not going to talk about that today. But if you want to find out more, I have presented an overview of the project within the Innovation Lab webinar. And as Philip said earlier in the sessions, that this can be accessed through the Next Generation website. And maybe, Philip, if you could just put that up on the chat box, then the link to that, that would be really helpful. But today I'm going to talk to you very quickly about a project that I think could be developed in the community energy sector and rolled out with the on a national basis. But it's not there yet, so I'm bringing something to you to think about this afternoon, and it's good to share with you all. The idea was really stimulated when we were commissioned by a local parish council in Hungerton to do a feasibility of a rural electric car club funded through the Midlands Energy Hub, the RCEF grant that you'll all know about. And the parish council had a village of 121 homes, around 300 residents, aiming to be zero carbon by 2030. It's lovely, these targets, isn't it? That's just about 8 years' time. So they're deeply rural, east of Leicester. There's no bus services, so real problems about social isolation and being out of the carbon transition. The main part of the feasibility was look at the setting up of an EV car club, but also addition of looking at renewable energy for the village as well. So starting on this project, sometimes you get in a situation where you don't really know enough about the subject, but you've got to do it. And so I reached out and I looked for similar projects in the UK, asking the question, well, how do you actually run a successful rural EV club? Because it's quite difficult, the numbers don't stack up. And there's only a handful of rural EV clubs in the UK. And I reached out to Derwent Valley Car Club up in the northeast, Harbury Energy Initiative, and Tisbury Car Club, set up by NADA Community Energy, which was supported through Next Generation programme as well. There was one in the Orkney Islands, but that was quite unique, had unique circumstances, so I put that one aside. Just to give you a bit of background, Derwent Car Club was a very low-cost model, been running 7 years, so well established, experienced. And a small rural village like the one I was dealing with in Hungerton, it had 200 homes. They have a volunteer driver system and developed for people who cannot drive themselves, which is an interesting concept in itself. They had an anchor driver for the whole of this time. So when I'm talking about an anchor driver, this is somebody who will take the car out on a regular basis and ensure that actually the car club washes its face and it's actually fine financially. And they've expanded geographically, and now they have three electric cars. Harbury Energy Initiative, on the other hand, they have two EVs, larger village, 1,400 homes, and its purpose is to reduce rural isolation. But it morphed into a free community transport service, which again is quite interesting why it did that. And it's now staffed by entirely 24 volunteers. And they are supported, they run it supporting through fundraising. So they raise £13,000 per year specifically for that service. And speaking to them, it's really difficult to find that £13,000 after a few years, because all your funders become the same and your donors become the same and you're asking the same people. But back to the feasibility study at Hungerton, we set up a project steering group, as you would imagine, with members of the community and village. And we sent round a village transport survey, which was a really good thing to do. And it was completed by 55% of the village. Now, that's not down to us, really. That's down to the project steering group, especially in the time of COVID. And a lot of the survey was completed online, but there were paper copies going around as well. And the key findings from the survey, I think, might go over quite a few rural villages. 62% of respondents, that was 39 residents, were really interested or somewhat interested in using an electric community car scheme for their own use, which is quite high. And the most important factors that they had when considering a community car scheme was the car's availability, environmental impact, convenience, and its location and cost, respectively. So there were a few things to get over and reassure people on. 65% of respondents are interested in volunteering. So it's a bit like those other car clubs that I mentioned, with high volunteering. The same was at Hungerton. And 40% of the respondents said that they would consider reducing their car ownership if they're in their household, if they participated in the scheme. Now, in reality, I'm not sure it would be that high, but it gives you an idea of what could be achieved. 46% of respondents said they consider purchasing or leasing an EV in the last 6 months. So it's starting to get through about driving and owning an EV. And 60% of respondents might consider using a community high-speed or fast, rapid charger in location in the village. And that was really interesting. So in summary, a strong support for an EV club, strong support for volunteering, and a fast charger. And fast charger is really interesting because it's especially useful for people in rented accommodation or did not have off-road parking. And EV owners that need a quick charge may only have a 7 kilowatt charger at home or even a plug. And actually, if you then plug into a fast or a rapid charger, you can get that charge much quicker, especially if you forgot to charge it overnight, for instance. There was preference for charging and having the site at the village hall. And so we stuck with that, really. And that had a couple of car parking bays that we could use. So what about the financial viability of it? It's very difficult to start a rural EV club without grant funding. So all the EV clubs I've mentioned all had external grant funding for the main asset, which is the expenditure of the car. And both Derwent and Harbury car clubs don't make a lot of money. It doesn't stack up. It's quite hard work, and there's no significant contribution to the EV's depreciation each year. So the average yearly cost of running a car club is estimated about £2,700, and that includes things like the insurance, the MOT, tyres, breakdown, that sort of thing. And when looking at the EV club model, it's not about the membership, but it's the journeys taken. So you're sweating that asset. I don't like that sort of thing, but you're sweating the asset of the EV, the electric vehicle. So for instance, in one example, if you had 15 members of your club and they did 2 journeys of 2 hours per day, 7 days a week, so that's 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, a membership fee of £5 and a hire charge of £4, it would generate £900 in membership fees, but £5,400 in hire charges. So once you take the expenses out of it, it makes around £3,700 per year. But what I would say, that's a car club that's run really well and it has that high usage. If you had 8 members driving once a day for 1 hour, 7 days a week, it'll make a loss of £600. So there's a real balance to get there of how successful your car club can be. So perhaps
Ben, I'm just going to interrupt 1 more minute, please. If that's
okay, yeah. So perhaps it would maybe make £2,500 per year. So I'm going to skip a little bit of my notes. So how do we actually make a whole system approach? We would want to put some PV. How do we sort of increase that £2,500 into £5,000 per year for a community energy organisation? So we started to look at about putting PV revenue. We looked about using the EV batteries into the village hall, for instance, and because that's used at night. We looked at vehicle to grid. We looked at charging revenues. So we're looking to try and develop a systems model approach. And I know different community energy groups have focused on these additional elements, and I would really like the possibility of bringing groups together to try and formulate a robust model. And Philip, just very, very quickly, as a sort of last thing, if a model could generate £5,000 per year for a community energy organisation, and an organisation develops 5 EV clubs, it would generate £25,000 annually for that community energy organisation. Other elements can come into play, such as telematics, and more clubs are cheaper, so that there may be further funding there. As a sector, we currently have around 400 community energy organisations. So imagine 50 organisations took this on and created 5 EV clubs each. That would be a network of 250 rural EV clubs across the country. And if each one made a surplus of £5,000, that would actually equate to £1.25 million of income supporting the community energy sector, and that's annually. So lastly, this is a real grassroots community energy proposal or idea, and it's interesting to note that having a small population like Hungerton of 200 people, it doesn't make sense for a commercial operator, but it could make sense for a community energy organisation. So there's a niche in the market. So Philip, thank you once again. I have run over, but happy to answer any questions, take any questions in the chat box, and I will also put my email in the chat box too. Or is that all right, Philip?
Perfect. Yes, thank you very much, Ben. Appreciate it. And yeah, there's a couple of quick requests for some of your information and data in the chat. So it seems like people are interested in what you've been talking about, which is great. So yeah, thank you for running through it and introducing some transport, which is the first kind of dedicated slot we've had about transport today. So I think it's an interesting and an essential part of that whole systems approach. So yeah, thank you very much, Ben. I'm now going to move on to something else which we haven't heard about so much today, which is energy efficiency. And Graham Booth from Chester Community Energy is going to talk to us about the project that they've been working on there. So if you're ready to proceed, Graham, I can hand over to you. Oh, well, Graham is on the list. So,
okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, got you. There we go, Graham. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Philip, and giving me the chance to talk about a very specific problem we've encountered at Chester Community Energy. I'm going to try and share the screen because I do need to rely on right. Can you see that?
No, we've got a very charming picture, which I presume is you at your wedding.
Let's see if I can. How about that?
Yeah, there we go. That works.
And let me see if I can. Yeah, okay, that works. Okay, yeah. Yeah, my name is Graham Booth. I'm a director of Chester Community Energy Limited. We are quite a young organisation. We were formed in 2016. We installed solar PV on a local leisure centre, and since then we've done 2 more, total capacity of 170 kilowatts. We have 5 directors. We're all volunteers, plus a secretary, and we have a part-time paid administrator as well, and 93 members. Since the FITs, we've found it quite difficult to actually to find another project that's viable, particularly hosts for solar. We were lucky enough to be successful with a bid for funding from Power to Change, and it was in the New Generation Innovation Fund. We were quite surprised that our project was chosen. We didn't think it was particularly innovative, but it did have that community engagement, because the project was to put retrofit LED lighting into community centres. But we have found one particular problem, one particular barrier that so far, after 2 years of trying, we've not actually solved. So this presentation is just about that, as it may be of interest to other community groups who are thinking of fitting an energy efficiency measure on the same basis that we proposed. So this is our basic project. It was an LED lighting retrofit for community buildings. We'd found 300 potential buildings in West Cheshire that this could happen to. About 80 we thought were viable and even less financially viable. But there's a good base there, and we proposed that we would do 20 in 2 years. The basis of the business model was a pay-as-you-save scheme. And this meant that the customer paid for the savings in power that the LED lighting provided, so that the repayments would be matched with the savings. So, for example, if there were savings of £50 a month with the new lighting, then we would be basing the repayments on £50 a month. In that way, that the building wouldn't be paying any more for the new lighting and the benefits of it than it was paying before for the old electricity. The repayment period would be limited to 5 years to limit the amount of interest that was paid. At that point, we were charging interest at 4%, because we were going to raise the capital through a share offer at 4%. And it was based on a complete retrofit of the old lighting. So we weren't going to do partial lighting. It was the whole lighting or nothing, and it was going to be new fitting. So this is our journey so far over a 2-year period. And this is just the journey to find the credit finance solution that we were looking for. We were initially quite surprised that our business model actually come under consumer credit regulation, but we soon found out that it did. Going first to the Consumer Credit Trade Association, and we just simply asked the question, is it a regulated activity that we're carrying out? And they said, probably, but you better go to the FCA and they will tell you definitely if it is. So the FCA said, yes, it would be a regulated activity as far as they knew, but we would, if we applied, if we made an application, then that would just sort it out. So we were given a caseworker to work with at the FCA. We put in our applications. It was very involved. There was a lot of documentation, a lot of information they required, and we weren't successful initially with the application. We tried again, and again we weren't successful. And at that point, I think after about 5 months of dealing with the FCA, we realised that really, as lay people, we weren't in a position to submit this. This was really a job for people who had specific skills in credit finance. But they did put us on to their Innovate team, which is a team that deals with the sort of more unusual cases. And we applied to the Innovate team, and they accepted us. I think we only had one, at the most 2 communications with them. The first communication, we'd waited for about 3 months. And I'm not sure if the second communication actually arrived, but after another 5 or 6 months, we decided that the Innovate team wasn't going to be for us anyway. They were far too slow. It's obvious that the FCA were very understaffed and not responsive. So we started looking for other ways through this problem, and we decided to go and look for third-party help to provide the finance credit services we required. And we found a community bank in Wales. They were very helpful. They were prepared to do it, but they wanted 8% on outstanding loans, which meant putting about 15% in most cases on our projects, and 15% couldn't be sustainable and it would work financially. So having drawn a blank on third-party involvement, we decided to go to solicitors and get some legal advice, and probably in retrospect, we should have done this far earlier. And Stephen Scown put us on to a barrister at Guildhall Chambers, and we paid for a barrister's opinion on regulated activity and how we could find an exemption, or if we could find a workaround in our particular circumstances. And we paid £1,500 plus VAT for that legal opinion. And the rest of the presentation is really based on the information we got from that barrister's opinion. And as you will see, it was a bit mixed, really, and not really the news that we wanted to receive. And the latest part of this is that we eventually went online, and we looked online for sources of help, and we found this company, Insured Compliance, and we talked to them. They've got two guys there who were former caseworkers at the FSA and the FCA as it is now. So they were completely au fait with what the FCA required and how they work and so on. And they advised us that we could go for limited permission lending instead of a full permission. That would be much cheaper and much more simple. And they would put that application in for us, and it would cost us £600 plus VAT. So if I go into this slide, so just to say what a regulated credit activity is, it's fairly simple. We didn't know, of course. It looks simple now. At the beginning, we didn't really know what it was. 4 aspects to it. There has to be an element of credit, obviously. So this is a deferred payment from the point of sale and supply. The credit is provided of any amount. So as far as the FCA is concerned, there's no minimum amount for these regulations. Credit of any amount comes within the regulations. The lender is a natural person. Well, this virtually includes everybody, and it certainly includes a community benefit society. So we are included as a lender under the regulation. There are a few exemptions, but we are not one of them, unfortunately. And the recipient of the credit is an individual person, a partnership, or an unincorporated association. And the organisations that we were dealing with, our potential customers, were really all trustees of charities or trustees of village halls, and they were all unincorporated. So we were unequivocally a regulated credit activity. We had to find accreditation to comply. So why did we find the FCA accreditation such a barrier? The point is that it's a criminal offence if you carry out a regulated activity and you haven't got accreditation. So it's a serious matter if you're not working within the law. The application process is the same for all applicants, and there are no concessions for a small business. So we were treated exactly like like a credit company who was applying for accreditation, or a multi-million pound, multi-billion bank. There was no difference. They were very thorough, and they went through everything.
I'm just going to interrupt and ask for 1 minute or so, please. More.
Okay. The FCA guidance as well is very complex, as well as the regulation. That's complex, and there's a lot of documentation that's to be provided. But the worst thing of all is that you have to demonstrate that you have the size and the resources to deal with the application, but more importantly, the ongoing monitoring and reporting and dealing with defaults and vulnerable customers. And we fell down on that quite badly, I think, as a small business. There are a few exemptions. If you're a limited company, then you are not included within the regulations as well. And there's an exemption if you make 12 payments in 12 months. Well, that didn't really apply to us because we really need more than 12 months to pay back the capital for an LED retrofit, more like 5 years, 12 months. So that particular one didn't apply to us either. So there are some workarounds which we looked at. Using an authorised provider of finance, we'd looked at with a community bank. We found that too expensive. We had a couple of suggestions from other community groups using a service contract or using a lighting hire agreement. But we found that, it doesn't matter what you call your agreement. If it's a regulated activity, it comes under the regulations, and ours was. So a service agreement or a hire agreement didn't apply. And this is the last one, applying for accreditation for limited lending, and that's the one that's ongoing at the moment. And our application has been put into the FCA on behalf of us by ensured compliance. So final conclusions: if the payment, if you're going to go on got a business model and your payments from your customers are deferred over time, then it's regulated. It's a criminal offence if you don't get accreditation. If your customer is a corporate body, like a limited company, then you're okay. The regulations don't apply to you. Full accreditation is a very lengthy process. It requires specialist professional knowledge, and it's got a high cost. We were given a quote of £6,000 by eventually by ensured compliance for a full application. So yeah, beware framing the agreement as a service hire agreement. It's not what you call it, it's what it actually is. Using an authorised credit provider as an option is a good idea, but it adds a lot of cost. And finally, you could use limited permission lending, which is much cheaper and simpler, but there are conditions that come with that. And I hope I've just got it in time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Graham. Really interesting to get an insight into the challenges that you've faced and have persevered through. So yeah, I think everyone in the sector can identify with that perseverance and celebrate it. So yeah, we'll all be hoping for the best for the future of your project.
Thank you.
And so I'd now like to move us on to the second half of this session. We are going to then look further at the whole systems approach and multi-technology projects. So we're going to start with, I actually haven't checked how I pronounce his name, so it's either Addy or Adi, I should think.
Let's go with Adi.
Okay, brilliant. Adi Powell from Charge My Street, who is ready and raring. So I'll hand over straight to you. Thank you very much.
You can see that, can you? Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Yeah, cool, excellent. Okay, hi everyone. I'm Adi. I am project manager at Charge My Street, which is a community benefits society formed 3 years ago, based here in the Northwest. Just like to say, top work. So everybody who stayed on here all day, we're on the last lap, so let's crack on. So yeah, so we're a community benefits society, and we are all about, most definitely, community. Oh, hello. Community empowerment. So you know, you have community shops, you have community pubs, so why not community charge points? And in the scope of what we've been talking about today, the innovation, and I'll talk about this in a second. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about us, and then I'm going to specifically reference something that Kate talked about right back in the very first session. In fact, I think she was the first presenter of the day. So the innovation is working from a local perspective, from the ground up, rather than the big commercial operators who look from a sort of strategic overview, look at trunk roads and stuff, and the major conurbations, you know, specifically car parks, and look down. We want to look up, and as Ben was just talking about 2 presentations ago, very much that driver of people. We do the similar sort of surveys here. You know, there is that local will, and we want to tap into that and give people the opportunity to you know, work. So currently we have 62 sockets in operation. We've got further 38 in pipeline, possibly 30 more with our local authority partners. And currently, I think we're the second largest network operator in Cumbria. So that's just blowing our own trumpet. ZapMap on the left and overlaid with our ones on the right. So lovely. We're just coming to the end of an funded project with money from OZEV, scaling on-street charging infrastructure. And in fact, Derwent Valley Car Club, who Ben was referencing, are one of our project partners. And I'm just going to digress slightly. They started off as quite a small partner, and I think they'll forgive me for saying that, but their role has absolutely rocketed because, one, apart from infrastructure issues with electric vehicles, one of the major barriers to uptake is cost of the vehicles themselves. Car clubs sidestep this, Ollie. And so Derwent Valley and Tisbury down in the Nadder Valley in Wiltshire, where we've actually installed charge points for them, are driving this particular revolution. And so that is part of us, working with local communities, so car clubs, but you have to work with everybody you can offer you things. So another of our partners is Carlisle City Council. So our charge points are becoming more and more recognisable across Carlisle City Council's area. But in addition, we have other people. So these are just 5 examples. So Lancaster City Council, another local authority, the Langdale Estate in Chapel Style in the Lake District National Park, a big corporate entity, but with a massive corporate social responsibility, always wanting to source things locally and do things from a community point of view. Similar with Eden Housing Project, Dent Parish Council, very similar. And then Moreland Newby Village Hall, we're trying to support both urban and rural locations, but where people don't have off-street parking and are ignored by the major providers of electric vehicle charge points, the fossil fuel providers, the EV, the Shell and BP Charge Masters of this world, who have their place, but we're very much a different. And just to give you an impression here, last 30 days, this is on my dashboard. We've delivered 5 megawatts in EV chargers. Mainly, I've got to say, these were to rural locations, so there's definitely the market there. Another part of our innovation is the ability, so we currently funded by Innovate UK, but when we stand on our own 2 feet, it will be with community share offers. We are now on our 3rd, but another bit of the innovation that Innovate UK were interested in was the ability to focus on site. So we have developed this tool where you can pledge to a specific site. The one we're looking at is the Anglers Rest, which is at Bamford in the High Peak in Derbyshire, where obviously we need the investment because it's quite expensive to install in this place due to the high DNO cost and difficulty of dig. But we can gauge support for that. Pledging is a simpler way. So you're pledging for a specific location, but you actually will invest in our central shareholder fund, because that makes more sense. You share the risk, you share the benefit as community shareholders. So that's another part. And so back to what Kate was talking about earlier on, is this the private wire thing. So this is a case study. Buttermere, in case you don't know where it is sort of northwest lakes, and even by the Lake District National Parks, it is quite isolated. So there it is. Reference points there are probably Scorfell Pike to the south, Helvellyn over to the east there, and Grisdale and Keswick up there to the north. So you know approximately where it is. Now, Buttermere Hydro, we were approached by the local community energy group who were very interested in putting a hydro scheme on the beck that comes into Buttermere itself. The local hotel, the Bridge Hotel in Buttermere, a lovely place, had agreed, so this was part of this tying things together, had agreed to buy all their energy from the hydro scheme as and when it became in operation. But in order to then strengthen that business case, they approached us because there's a second level. If we, as an electric vehicle network operator, were to then buy our energy from the hotel, which is buying all its energy from the hydro scheme, it makes the business case obviously that much stronger for the hydro scheme. Also makes it stronger for the hotel, because the hotel will be buying hydro electricity at a preferential rate, and even if they put when the hotel taps on a little extra to make it worth their while. We would still be buying energy at below the headline rate that we would normally have to from a regular provider. And there are some challenges here. I was going to miss this slide out, but it was also referencing Kate's point about how difficult is it getting from your hydro scheme and getting to your location. So here the hydro scheme is going to be slightly upstream, just for you've got the Buttermere electricity substation, but up the beck there is where the hydro scheme is going to be, and it's going to come into the Bridge Hotel. Now the beck there is a bit of a problem because you can see in the bottom right image where we want to put the charge point, where in fact has to put the charge points in the hotel car park, is the other side of the beck. Now, this presents various problems if we wanted to initially put the EV chargers in there. So we went to local RDNO, which is Electricity Northwest. First asked if we could get a new connection in, a simple new connection. Not possible, unfortunately. Reinforcement was required for our charge points and the beck was in the way, so it was going to cost far too much. The second issue was then we said, well, can the hotel increase their supply because they're on that side of the beck? But unfortunately, the local substation is up to its hilt anyway, and so couldn't give any more to the hotel to give to us. So we came to sort of an impasse at that point. Kate then came in with the suggestion, well, the hotel is run on oil, so how about heat pumps? But once again, heat pumps are quite thirsty in terms of their electricity.
Press Alt plus what?
And so we're in that sort of stuck thing at the moment that the business case still stacks up, I believe, without us, and we'll come to that in a moment. But there are difficulties with it. It makes sense for both heat pumps and electric vehicle charge points to be included in that whole business case for the hydro scheme, but making it work, because there is no point in Electricity Northwest doing the reinforcement or us paying them to do the reinforcement at this stage, because it's only going to be temporary. It's only going to be for a few years until the hydro scheme is operational, at which point then the charge points, the heat pumps, the hotel are all buying their electricity off the hydro scheme. So we've got sort of a little bit stuck there, and it is the classic chicken and egg.
Eddie, I'm just going to interrupt 1 more minute, please.
Go, yeah, chicken and egg. And so I can't tell you whether there's a happy ending to this, because we don't know. There is a launch event 2 weeks' time in Buttermere, where we're talking about the results of the feasibility study. The scheme is agreed in principle. Charge My Street is still committed to be continued. And then just a little bit about us, what next for Charge My Street. We're looking for possible sites in the Northwest and beyond, community energy groups that we can work with, both, singularly putting in an EV charge point, but more working with other renewables. Same nationwide. We're looking at nationwide sites. There's our site map there. And any more, please go to our site, and I will just briefly hijack the next 10 seconds to the past 3 months. We have been inundated, absolutely inundated with requests and contacts. And now with the fuel crisis, the last 2-3 weeks have been mental. I caught COVID at the start of September. I'd just like to use this platform to apologise to anybody on here I haven't been back in contact with. I'm very sorry. Thanks.
Lovely, thanks, Eddie. And yeah, really interesting to hear what happens when a project can grow more complex as it's underway, and your involvement in it. So yeah, thank you for running us through that. And yeah, exciting times for Charge My Street. So moving on to our final speaker today, I'm delighted to introduce Ollie Pendered, who's from Community Energy South and is involved in many other organisations in the sector. And also is a director of Community Energy England. So another well-known face in the sector. So we're very pleased to have Ollie here today to talk to us. So Ollie, if you're ready to go, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Philip. And great, AD, great to see what you're doing, and I empathise with you at this time of year. I bet you are being inundated with requests. It's a great model. My name is Ollie Pendered. I'm from Community Energy South. I'm going to introduce you to some work that we're doing with our Pathways programme, so our mentoring programme mainly in Essex, and just how it works with local area energy planning and whole systems approaches, and a couple of innovations that fit into that. I've got a short presentation that I can share as well, just as a guide. And that seems to have worked, so that's good. Put it on presentation mode. And hopefully you can see that, Philip, can you?
Yeah, I think, yeah, there we go. Great, perfect.
Yeah, good. So just with Community Energy South, we look at the southeast of England and we look at forging partnerships for the community energy sector as a whole, mainly with the county councils. The Eastern New Energy Project and the Southeast New Energy Project are European projects, the last of the European projects that are bringing resource and expertise to the region, like Energy Systems, Catapult and others. And it's just really that to link in with the whole systems and the local area energy planning, we see that these relationships are really important to build for the sector. And we've made sure that community energy is embedded in the regional energy strategy as well as the local authority energy strategies. And that's really important now that local authorities are committing to net zero, that community energy is embedded in those cabinet papers and energy strategy. Now, our Pathways programme, we were asked if we started Community Energy South because of a mentoring programme, a peer mentoring programme that in 2011, where we worked with 12 community energy groups through a year-long programme. And we've gone back to that, to our roots really, in supporting the growth of new community energy groups. And that was supported primarily by Essex County Council, who came to us and said, look, we have very little community energy in Essex. We are really committed to climate change as a county council. Can you come and work with us and see if you can help support the community energy sector in Essex? And that's important, listening to the previous speakers, because what we're trying to do is create a platform for new innovations and new community energy models to thrive in, and so that they can spread to areas where there's an up and running new community energy network. So we have a process for that, for establishing. We do a big communications program over a region where we reach out to community energy networks or interested green networks and get people who are interested in community energy and try and team them up to set up groups. And then with our team of mentors from other community energy groups, we take them through, help them get set up to their business plans and up and running. And that's really working well in Essex. Now, that's really important for having the support of the local authority. And as the local authorities develop their net zero plans, but also their local area energy plans, if we can establish a community energy network in regions as well, then they can work together and advocate each other and look at new business models and finance and consent. So you starting a community energy group or a new initiative or an innovation can get that local authority or regional support that you need to make it grow. And here in Essex, you'll see these 8 groups that are now up and running and developing their business plans are really ready to link in with the rest of the UK and other initiatives like the car clubs and EV charging. And so please do reach out to them or come through us and let us know, and we'll team you up if you want to expand your initiatives, because they have the support of the county council and strategy. So that's really helpful. Now, a couple of initiatives that we've been running as well. So Riding Sunbeams, you would have heard about, I hope. It's a community-led scheme, but to embed that into the region's strategy, we needed to work with the Regional Energy Hub and the local enterprise partnerships to embed it in their strategies. And that helped us to open the door with Network Rail and start to develop those projects. And this year we're building over the next year up to summer 22, we would have built a 4 megawatt solar farm to power the railways with Capener Community Solar, which is a community energy group in East Sussex. And that's evolving and that's developing. It's a slow burner, but very much embedded in that is the ability for community ownership. So, so that's an innovation that local authorities and regions can really get behind at the time. It is really focused at the southeast at the moment, where they have a DC network, but we're hoping to open up those conversations in other regions. And another initiative that is running up around whole system is the Community Heat Project, which we've developed with UK Power Networks and local energy group of ESCO and Borough Happold as well, who I heard groups talking about earlier who have been supporting the sector. And this is a rural heat project looking at rural off-gas grid communities that are reliant on oil. And oil is 30% of a community's carbon for oil heating, and there are lots of groups looking at these solutions now. And what we're trying to do is get UK Power Networks to input to that and realise for their 3,000 rural communities in their footprint that there's an impact on the grid and reinforcement of the grid, and that communities align with this work, but also with the transition to EVs as well. So that's a very exciting project. Yeah, so do keep in touch. That was just a quick run through, and hopefully we've caught up with some time as well, Philip.
Yeah, we certainly have. Thanks very much, Ollie. And yeah, it's great to see what's happening down in your region and with these various complicated projects and the pathways. I think since it is relevant, I know we're already slightly over and we haven't been too many questions, but there's one come through from Nigel Hargreaves, which I think I will ask you, Ollie, which is Nigel said the crucial first step is to get county council support. So if very briefly you could say a bit about how that support came about in terms of, did you approach them, did they approach you, what was the origin of that, because I think that's quite relevant to others.
Yeah, that's with I think it was a bit of both really. With county council support, obviously they are stakeholders in the regional energy hub, so that's a good place to start. But also Nigel, with Essex County Council, yeah, they came to us really. Tom Day came to us from Essex and asked us to get involved. And yeah, so really you do need to look at who's responsible for climate change within the county council, the lead officer or director level, but also the cabinet members, the councillors responsible for that portfolio. So I would start there. That's a good question. Thanks, Nigel.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ollie. Okay, and thanks so much to all the 4 speakers in the final session. Brilliant in terms of taking us forward and giving us some extra fuel to discuss. So now it's time for the final breakout session. So we're going to repeat what we did before and split everybody up. And then you'll go into a discussion session. There'll be a facilitator again who can help move that along. And after that, it will just be kind of popping everyone back into the main room. I'll wrap up and then that will be the end of the day. So thank you again to the 4 speakers, and yeah, get ready, bear with us as Charlotte presses the buttons and does the technical side, but imminently we'll all be moved into the breakout rooms again. So I hope you'll stick with us for those discussions and join in and share your views and opinions for the day. Thank you from Andrew. So yeah, I hope all of you managed to kind of conclude at the right perfect second and then get popped back in here. So lovely. I hope all your discussions were constructive and interesting, and that that's been a nice way to end the day by talking to some of the other people active in the sector and hearing about their experiences and sharing your own. So I think looks like everyone's back in the room. So yeah, thank you for making it this far and bearing with us today. We've got one final poll which will pop up in a minute. There we go. So just give us a bit of feedback. It will only take you a couple of seconds. So yeah, I'd just like to kind of close briefly by saying thank you very much for being part of the event today. It's really been amazing to see so many people interested in working on community energy, engaging with what is happening now in the sector and what can come next. So this morning we heard about the characteristics of private wire projects, how to make them work, how to engage with a range of funding sources, how community energy can develop various forms of heat generation and services. Then we heard about how to build relationships and collaborate proactively with local authorities, how local authorities can stimulate community energy activity in their areas and support community energy through the procurement of their own energy. We've heard then about how agile community energy organisations can be the social conscience of the energy system while innovating and scaling up the work that they do, engaging in how the energy system is planned and working with multiple partners on complex projects as we build our capacity to take advantage when new markets become mature. Lastly, then we heard about some of the opportunities for scaling up new projects and challenges with getting them off the ground and scaling them up, and how projects can become more complex as the progress and multiple components and connections and stakeholders involved in driving a whole systems approach. So yeah, I think we can safely say we've had a lot of content and information today and a lot of interesting insight from really experienced people in the sector. And so I'd just like to thank all of the 16 speakers and the breakout room facilitators and Kate Gilmartin and Mary Anderson in particular for helping with the organisation. I would also like to ask that if you're not a member of Community Energy England, you consider joining us. We have a range of membership categories. There's definitely one to suit you, and we particularly encourage new community organisations starting out on their energy journey to join us and connect up with our more experienced members through this membership. If you're already a member, please do keep us updated with what you're up to, what you're doing, the successes that you're having, the challenges you're facing. We have our newsletter that you can put things in if you've got announcements to make or successes, things like that. And we always welcome any kind of announcement, news item that you'd like to share with us. We can put that on our website. So we do use us as a way of getting information about your activities out into the sector and sharing it with us. And also do make use of the resources from Next Generation. I think they've been mentioned several times today, but it's just important that we make sure that as many people as possible know about them, because they've been putting a lot of work into collating information, experiences and getting them out there. So that's the Next Generation project programme, and they'll got their learning resources. Also look, if you're interested in resources, look for the how-to section of our website. So that's where we've collated as many things as we can find, and events, future events, both of ours and of our members and friends will be on there. We have an online submission form if you'd like to submit one of your events to be featured on our website. Lastly, the most popular page on our website is always our funding page. So if you've never been there, you might find it useful. It lists as many sources of funding for the community energy sector as we can find. So do make use of that. Also, if you find some funding, do tell us about it, because we can share it with others. If you are interested in policy and advocacy, understanding what our activities are, trying to engage with policymakers, you'll find that on our website too, and ways to get involved if you'd like to kind of add your organisation's voice and help us with that. And lastly, I'll just mention our COP26 activities. So many of you will have heard of it. I'm pretty sure all of you will have heard of COP26, but it's coming up soon and is a focus for some of our activity at the moment. So again, lots of information on our website about that if you would like to get involved. Lots of people asking about the video and the slides. We will do our best to process the video as soon as we can and get that uploaded onto YouTube. It does take a little while, so we'll try to do that by tomorrow. But don't worry, we'll send an email out which will have lots of details and things from today in terms of things that people have said, links that they've mentioned, the presentation slides, and the link to the YouTube channel. And if you missed that, just go to YouTube and look at Community Energy England, because everything's on there, including videos from all our past events. Duncan mentioned the one that was about local area energy planning. So if you want more detail on that, there's a past event about that. But also we've got other conferences and things from the past 18 months. So there's a lot available on YouTube. So I will stop there and take a breath. And just again, say thank you very much for coming. We appreciate your participation and support as an organisation, and again, huge kudos to just celebrate the sector, because again, we've heard so many amazing things that have been happening, and the future of community energy is big and bold and bright, and yeah, keep on there with that perseverance and innovation. So thank you all, and see you again soon.